Hey guys, this is Courtney from Lil's Boom, and today we're going to be talking about the Aquarius full moon happening on August 11th at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So that'll be like 5:30 for East Coast, and I believe 8:30 for West Coast. Do not count me on that. So this is a big moon that is playing off of the one that we just experienced. So if you have not already seen my Leo new moon video, please do go ahead and watch that. The astrology forecast for August covers kind of the intricacies of what is in between this, but these moons are together. They are very much a part of the same storyline. And the reason I say that is because what has been active in the sky is this conjunction between the North Node, Uranus, and Mars. And these planets and points have been together, kind of stirring things up. And so we might not have necessarily noticed it at the Leo new moon. We might notice it more at this full moon, or maybe vice versa. The Leo new moon I really saw as us being able to plant a seed and see a little bit more of what is to come in our future and what will change up and kind of new growth, new energy. While this Aquarius full moon is about kind of a reckoning where we are releasing the old, where we are recognizing what is not working anymore. And so it's been lucky for us that we get kind of that glimpse of the new first so that we can more easily let go of what is not for us. And the reason why this is generally going to be a time of letting go is because Saturn is conjunct the moon. And so having Saturn, which is a planet that usually is indicative of some kind of ending or a beginning, in terms of the fact that we will often commit to something when Saturn is there. But because it is a full moon, which already has to do with endings or culminations or fruitions of something, which usually a fruition of something is almost like an end to one way of being, because we have now kind of completed the cycle. We have now gotten the fruit, and now the plant is not really producing anymore, or it just doesn't have the same growth effect. So that's essentially what we're seeing here, is a full moon having a culmination period. And then on top of that, we have Saturn, which is already a planet that is asking us to commit further to something, which for many of us, it's going to be about committing to what we want to end, what we want to stop or turn away from. Especially because on top of it being Saturn, we are experiencing a square right here to these planets that are conjunct. And Mars is also very definitively about cutting things away. Saturn is not so definitive. It can be cutting things, ending things, but it has more so to do with the resounding energy of a finality or a decision or a commitment to one way of being, whether that's with or without something. So it doesn't necessarily imply that it will be an ending, but the fact that it's a full moon and squaring Mars, a planet of cutting things away, quite literally, it's a surgery planet. It's a planet that has to do with knives and war and literally cutting cutting things away. Okay, anyway, you guys know what I'm saying. So yeah, that's why I'm saying it's very likely that we're going to have some buildup of energy that asks us to really look at an area of our life and say, I'm done with this. I'm no longer doing this. And that ending might happen in multiple areas. It could happen where this Mars Uranus is. It could happen where the full moon is. And it could even happen along the axis. So I'm going to kind of give examples of what this ending might be. And with the Leo new moon video that I did prior, that will show you what will take place of, this extra room that you're making up in your life. So what is going to kind of fill up that space? So to add all of this moon is almost in an exact square with Uranus. What we can expect from Uranus is that there is going to be some element of freedom and liberation in this process of ending. So endings can often be fraught with difficulty, I think. Is it wrought? I think it's fraught. And that's okay. But what is great about this ending is that it almost has this quality of feeling like it's a load off of our shoulders as it happens. And that doesn't mean that it's always going to be very easy, but it's something that we as a soul really want. And that's going to help us grow, as I mentioned, because something really needs to take root here. And there's just not enough soil and space in this garden for us to plant new seeds without removing some of these things that have been dying and decaying and just really taking up space. And so this Uranus here, that square with Mars, is going to rip out the old things. And Uranus is going to make us feel this sigh of relief of, oh my gosh, there's so much more nutrients here in this soil. There's so much more space. There's more, essentially, room for me to express who I really am and what I really want in my life. And whatever was here before felt like a constriction. It felt limiting. It felt like it put me in a box. It felt like it was trying to define me by maybe a tradition or an old viewpoint or old way of doing things. And it's now like you're ready to just break free from that and be the most fresh and current and accurate version of yourself, and not defined by your past or by society or by any expectations, which typically come along with Saturn. So Saturn here is being challenged by Mars and saying, and especially Uranus, you cannot do things the way that you used to do them. You can't just keep trying to move forward under this old guise, because that is not you anymore. That is not authentic to you anymore. And I think that this is a perfect kind of culmination of what is going to make us more joyous and more like ourselves. And I say that especially because Venus is now moved into the sign of Leo. And Leo, as many of us know, is a very heart-centered sign that is focused. It's where the sun is its happiest. It's where it's focused on the development of the self, the ego, the boundaries of the self, the understanding of the self, and essentially what you do out in the world, what you create, how you interact, the way that you express yourself. It's all a form of understanding who you are. And so Venus in the sign of Leo is going to give us a little bit more support in order to understand what it is that we truly value as individuals and what we want to create more of in our life. And it's going to help us become a lot more lighter and happier. That's why Leo is associated with the children, because children don't have these traditions and expectations that they are constricted or put into a box with. When they're very young, they are just wild and free and authentic to who they are and expressive of that nature. And so now Venus and Leo is trying to get us to express that once again. So this is a really big full moon, and it can feel like kind of intense energy, but I think it's ultimately going to help us a lot. And I pulled the Hierophant and Six of Swords, which I feel like is this combative energy between Saturn and Mars here, where it's kind of like this battle of tradition, what we've always done, and which is the Hierophant, and then the Six of Swords, which is about transition, leaving that behind, redefining who we are now. And so for many of us who are unwilling to redefine ourselves, this could be a point of contention in astrology with you, where you might experience the universe pushing you to make those changes. You might encounter really difficult circumstances in a relationship if it's clearly not meant for you anymore. You might experience like an uphill battle in your work if you were meant to quit that job. And you'll start to really feel the weight of this thing, and it will become unbearable. And that's what Uranus does, is it breaks free from unbearable situations before our soul dies. It wants to rebel. It wants to push back. And Mars is our will, and our will cannot be broken. So having these two kind of rebellious, untamable wild horses next to each other, Saturn cannot withstand this energy. Saturn will break, even if it's strong in the sign of Aquarius. It will break because it was not meant to withstand this right now. We are also experiencing Mercury making a trine to these planets here. to Uranus and Mars. So Mercury is very strong in the sign of Virgo. Our minds are kind of in line. They're more organized. They are more efficient. So generally Mercury in Virgo is very good at taking care of things, taking care of the details, the facts, being practical. How can we actually ground some ideas into reality? And it's awesome to have this paired with the trine with Uranus and the North Node, because we're going to get these kind of imaginative, genius insights, creative solutions to problems, ways of thinking that can break us out of the old patterns. We're going to get the solutions, essentially, that we are looking for. And I also pulled the 10 of Cups and Page of Swords, which I feel like this is trying to illustrate that we're going to have either some communication with people, or we're going to have a new perception or new ideas that will allow us to create a much more fulfilling life. Because again, we've been kind of trudging uphill in this old kind of environment in some area of our life, and it's not going to work anymore. So we have to have the right way of viewing things or creative solution to essentially break free from that and do something new. We already kind of know what we want to do that's new because we had that Leo new moon, but now Mercury is coming here in Virgo, giving us more of the practical details, and Uranus is giving us this genius insight into truly how to make this a reality in our lives. Instead of just it being a fun idea, it's grounding it into something real, especially with Uranus being in an earth sign. We're also experiencing Venus making a trine to Neptune, and it's also opposite Pluto. So kind of a lot of intense energy that Venus is experiencing. There's an idyllic energy coming from Neptune where we can tend to fantasize and idealize the things that we are investing in now. Venus and Leo, as I mentioned, is helping us pull creatively towards our future, our desires, our soul's expressions, these new things that are going to really light us up in a playful, childlike way. And this Neptune trine can give us this sense of trust in the universe that when we follow these creative passions, it will bring out what we want. But the opposition with Pluto, there is also some kind of challenge here where there may be underlying forces within our own psyche or that we encounter from others that we have to kind of confront. And this trine with Neptune, while really beneficial in emotion and creativity and ideas and sensuality even, while that's really good, it can also bring a certain amount of like delusion. And even though it's a positive aspect and we're getting this support by the universe, we still might sometimes have like a little bit of lacking of clarity around the situation. And so I think it could be beneficial to have this opposition to Pluto to challenge us to maybe look a little bit deeper. If we just had Neptune trine Venus, it would be this perfect, beautiful little energy that we might just kind of skim around on the surface and not get down to the root of why we want something or confront our fears about us like not being able to have something. Because Pluto is representing this unconscious part of ourselves. It does kind of, Pluto and Saturn can embody the fear that we have, but Pluto is largely suppressed. So it's these things that we're almost acting instinctively to avoid or to do because we are fearful, without maybe even getting down to the reason why we are doing or not doing something. So I do feel like this Pluto opposition is going to bring some of that deeper wisdom and insight into our own value system, into our own vision and desires and all of these things. And it's going to ask us to really question things and not take them at face value. And again, this could come from somebody else, from an outside source. You could feel challenged in some way. You could internally have a little bit more of uncertainty. And it's really here again to get you to get down to the core, as I mentioned numerous times, as to why you want something. Because if you don't have that why, if you don't have this kind of purpose as to why you do or you don't want something, then it's going to be a lot harder to achieve it. Because inspiration, which is coming from Neptune, can only get you so far. You know, inspiration is something that's beautiful, but it is fleeting. And so I think that this opposition will help us. I also pulled the King of Wands and the World card. And so I feel like this is us in many ways stepping into our power. The King of Wands knows exactly what he wants and why he wants it. And he also isn't just kind of getting lost in the details and doing it all himself. He is employing people to help him. He is utilizing his resources and his environment to make something happen to the point where he can then conserve energy and act more as a leader of his own life and of this business or whatever it is he's trying to do, instead of just somebody kind of really in the weeds, which Mercury in Virgo can tend to do. And so I think with this opposition, it can really bring out this leader in us, this desire to truly desire something. And that can then make us step up in our lives. Like, okay, I really have my why, and I need to now meet this challenge, this circumstance, this desire with some tenacity. And I think ultimately here, we're also going to get very clear on what we want, which will help us not waste our time, because Venus and Leo can be somebody who wants to indulge. It can be a time where we want to have that good wine, that good socialization, to dabble here, to dabble there, and we can kind of disperse our energy through these creative outlets that feel fun, but again, are not ultimately our deepest root desires. And so we, I think, are going to be able to much more easily cut people or activities and hobbies and even maybe certain values out that we once put as a priority in our life through our actions, because maybe you don't value TV and Netflix, but you do because of your actions. You're spending time watching it every day. So we're going to start to realize that we don't want those and cut them out, because that's what Pluto can tend to do. It can be sort of savage. And this is already a time of cutting away. And so we'll start to cut away the superfluous things in our lives that we realize are taking us away from our desires. And I think with the World card, there is some completion of a cycle here. And that might look very different for a lot of you. But there's something wrapping up. There's something that you're no longer investing energy into, no longer indulging in, no longer telling yourself, no longer valuing. There's something that you're wrapping up in general in your life that is like, it's not just like, okay, I'm not going to do that thing anymore, and then you move on and you maybe kind of replace it with something else. There's a very much like a lesson learned here. It feels, with the nodes especially involved in this full moon, it feels like some kind of karmic ending of a cycle, of no longer having to repeat a certain lesson, of understanding that something isn't good for you and not just finding a new outlet for it, but truly making steps forward in your life and not doing that thing anymore. And so I think many of you might need to hear that. And of course, there's always some degree of free will, so I can't just tell you you're all going to never repeat lessons. But I think that for many of us, there is some true ending of a cycle, an ending of a chapter, and a beginning of a new one. And we don't have to fear as much that it's just going to keep coming back. So I did pull some other cards about kind of what we can expect from this. And I got the Bird Bath card, which is from a deck that I don't have around here, but it was detoxing from things that are unhealthy, weighing us down. And some examples they gave were media, technology, habits, thoughts, and people. And then what's replacing that is the joyous nectar. We're moving more towards joy and more towards what it takes to succeed, because we are small, but we have all the resources we need. So we're small but mighty. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was that this is a Aquarius full moon at 19 degrees, and the Sabian symbols for that are a forest fire quenched. So this is essentially a cleansing through loss or through letting go. And we're making way for the new, vibrant, and healthier life. So when you think about a forest fire, you think about all the destruction. But what comes after is a much stronger, healthier forest. And so we are now kind of going to allow things to burn and feel a sense of cleanse or ease or freedom, because now we know things are going to be reborn in a new way. So let's go ahead and break this down for all the rising signs. We're going to start off with Aries Rising. So Aries Rising, this full moon is happening in your 11th house. So the sun right now is in, I just pulled the same cards that I pulled for the overview. So I'm trying to shuffle. So the sun right now is in your 5th house. So many of you guys might be enjoying like certain hobbies that you haven't picked up in a while. That's done, like Leo season is a lot about that. For example, I can notice myself always kind of picking up new things, or things that I haven't done in a while. Like I just started crocheting, which I've literally never done. It's super random. But hopefully I am able to actually make something. I was planning on doing something for a friend of mine. Okay. So you guys might just kind of feel that. You might feel like you're a little bit more creative, or you're kind of dabbling in different stuff, even if it means socially, like trying different, attending different events or trying different things that you've never done before. Okay. So the moon in your 11th house is conjunct Saturn, as I've mentioned, and it's squaring Uranus, Mars, and the North Node in Taurus in your 2nd house. So I feel like you guys may feel like there is something shifting. You've had a lot going on with Saturn in your 11th house anyway, in regards to your friendships, the way that you relate to others and understand people, the way that you feel like you belong or don't belong. You've kind of been undergoing this like larger challenge in that area, and growth spurt, I should say, where you're really having to step up and view things in a like responsible way, in a committed way, and realize that, you know, relationships take effort, relationships have consequences, you know, that kind of thing. So essentially, like, how am I contributing to the results I'm getting in my community? And so many of you might feel like you belong well to a community and it's not an issue. And some of you might feel like, oh my gosh, like I don't feel like I belong at all. And it's like, why is that? What am I doing in this situation? What's my responsibility here? So this has kind of already been going on. And now that we're having the full moon here, I feel like I can really draw some circumstances around your community to a head. I pulled the 7 of Swords, which is usually indicative of something that we are not seeing clearly. There's something that can be deceptive. You can see there's a snake on here. So when I think about this in terms of your friends or your community, it makes me feel like maybe you weren't seeing something clearly about a particular person or a particular group, that it's now becoming clear was maybe not in your best interest at all times. And especially with this square being to Uranus, Mars, and the North Node in your 2nd house, it's definitely giving off vibes of like, this thing that I thought was really stable is no longer stable. The 2nd house is where we draw our sense of security from. This is where we have our finances. And so you might notice that your sense of security is fluctuating a little bit, especially in terms of, you know, your kind of connections. And maybe even your finances a little bit, but I feel like, okay, I'm going to get to that in a second. I want to read a card. I got this deck that is called The Blind Spot by Teal Swan. And I want to see what our blind spots are, because Saturn and a full moon is about recognizing the truth and the hard truth behind situations. And especially with the 7 of Swords, which can lead to deception, I think it's especially important for you. So let me see what this says. If you have drawn this sigil, in this situation, you and perhaps other people do not see your own goodness, capability, or excellence. Maybe you are not feeling good enough. Perhaps you're looking at other people and wishing you were as good as they were. Perhaps you're perpetually caught in self-doubt, self-blame, and self-criticism. You do not see the truth of yourself clearly because you're seeing yourself through an inaccurate, negative light. Ask yourself, am I so afraid? What am I so afraid will happen if I admit to what is truly good and excellent about me? Why am I so afraid? Why is she worded like this? What am I so afraid will happen if I express this to other people? Every person who has been socialized, no matter where they grew up or what society they're raised in, has inner self that is critical. This is the inner critic, and it acts like a negative narrator, constantly commenting on you and your life. This voice is absolutely desperate and a painful way to make us a success according to our adopted definition of success, and to make us approved of by people within our society. Obviously, this method of coping with the world is in fact a setup for a life of self-shaming. The saddest part is that we don't realize it's an adaptation within us. We think it is us. It's like a parent who's so desperate for you to avoid failure that they end up suffocating you with pressure. What's important to see is that the voice keeps you drowning in shame, is a part of you that wants the best for you. Okay, that's a long thing. I'm not going to read everything. Okay. So essentially what I'm getting from this is I think the situation is going to be different for a lot of you. But the 11th house has a lot to do with conformity. Because as I've mentioned, the 11th house is about our sense of belonging. So what creates belonging is often when we have Saturn in the 11th, transiting through the 11th, we might feel like we have to suffer, or we have to do certain things like that, abide by certain traditions in order to belong. And there is a longer journey and realization here. The thing that you're not seeing with the 7 of Swords that might become clear now are ways that you may have adapted to an environment, or have not honored yourself, or have made yourself small, or anything of that nature in order to feel like you belong, as I've mentioned. So that's going to look really different for a lot of people, but that makes a lot of sense with the 4 of Wands and the Tower in reverse. The 4 of Wands gives me this sense of celebration, community, fun, and then it's in reverse. It's like I'm not having as much fun. I'm not able to just celebrate and to just enjoy. And the Tower in reverse is indicative of toppling things over yourself, knowing that this thing is not the best thing for me, so I'm going to push it over the edge and not try to do it anymore. And so I feel like many of you are realizing the sacrifice or the cost of belonging, or in certain situations, or even the cost to certain kind of communities, and maybe also the ways, especially with Mars and Uranus and everything in the 2nd house, and this receiving the square from the moon. This is really activating this part of you that has tolerated being less sure of yourself and less confident, and accepting less than what you deserve and less than your value. So I think many of you are going to realize, some people in my life, some things that I try to do or try to belong to are not actually worth my energy, and I am more valuable, and I am stronger and more confident than I originally thought. And because of that, I'm now seeing what I deserve, and I can have a change up in some of my relationships. I can attract some more people that really reflect this more confident version of myself. It's almost like if you're wearing these glasses that are kind of those funny goggles, and then they're just these little pinpoints. I feel like when you look at yourself, many of you were just seeing these little fractions of yourself, and then you are attracting people who maybe only express or reflected fractions of yourself. And it was a cost to belong to that group. And now you are starting to see yourself in full vision and full clarity and in full greatness and goodness. And because of that, you're able to then attract community and friendships and a sense of belonging in a really fulfilling way with this fulfillment card, because you are actually attracting people who see you and see you the way that you see yourself. And it wasn't going to be possible before, because before you were settling only because you actually were thinking lesser of yourself or not valuing yourself, whether it was subconscious or conscious. And so now you are starting to realize your true inherent worth, and you are attracting that in your environment around you. And so you may have some relationships that kind of dwindle away because of their inability to see you with this full clarity that you can truly see. And yeah, that's what I think is going to be happening for you. You guys also have Venus in the 5th house, which can be kind of social, and it's opposite Pluto in the 10th. So let me pull a card on that, actually. Wouldn't it be opposite? Wait, let me see something. Because it would be opposite. Okay. I guess they're not opposite signs, but they are in opposition within degrees. So that's why. Okay. Okay, so I got the 10 of Wands in reverse. To me, this is saying that you are putting down some kind of burden and no longer carrying the weight of certain relationships. I think Venus opposite Pluto gives us an ability to see really clearly where we are wasting time with people, where people are just. I think that was well said. I think that's all I'm gonna say. And this is also trining Neptune in the 12th. So I feel like universe is like, cleanse your hands, babe. Like, you're good. Walk away. The other thing I wanted to say is you have Mercury and Virgo in the 6th making a trine to this Uranus North Node Mars. I guess Uranus North Node in the 2nd. So this is a time when you can start to get really creative ideas and solutions, especially in regards to like your work or your health or your routine, and how you can maybe make more money, how you can create more value, because you're starting to see your value more. And so it's going to manifest as these opportunities and ideas about how you can create value in the world, because it's an inner reflection. It's an outward reflection of your inner world. So that was kind of long, so I'm going to move on. But thank you so much, Aries. That was your reading. If it resonates, please let me know by liking and commenting down below. I do read all the comments, even though I'm slow to respond. And if you want a reading from me, you can get one at willisboom.com, or the links down below. And I hope you have a great day. Bye. Up next, we have Taurus Rising. So for you guys, the sun right now is in your 4th house in Leo, and it's opposite the moon and Saturn in your 10th house. So this is going to definitely bring about some kind of forward movement in terms of career, an ending or a culmination, something kind of switching up in your life goals. So I always say career because I am so career focused personally, but it's not just career. It's anything that you kind of set your sights on in life. Like, I want to pursue this. I want to do that. If it feels like a life goal, like something substantial, it's a 10th house topic. So I pulled the Judgment card, which is about making a really important kind of life-altering decision and almost awakening to something within yourself that is pointing you in a certain direction. So when we have parts of ourselves that lie dormant, it's like we have unexpressed parts of ourselves, and then all of a sudden they wake up, they turn online, and we become more whole, and we make different decisions as a result, because we are now finally seeing things that we couldn't see before. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing going on right now for you in the area of career. This is making a square to Uranus Mars in the North Node in your 1st house. So I think for many of us, this has a lot to do with like how we are valuing ourselves, because Taurus is about what we value. And being in your 1st house, it's about you, your gifts, your ability to take up space and really own who you are. And it's kind of like, do I want to do this on a grander scale? Do I want to do this in a bigger way? And do I believe in myself to do that? That might be a question many of you are having. I just pulled the Inner Child card, which reminds me a lot of the sun being in Leo. You guys also have Mercury and Virgo in the 5th house, which is a house often associated with Leo. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But for many of you, you might be just kind of experiencing some inner child healing and also expressing of the inner child. So feeling more creative, feeling more alive, especially with this Queen of Wands card. I think many of you are stepping into a sense of confidence that you haven't felt in a while. Okay, I'm pulling shadow cards for everyone. It's the Blind Spot Oracle deck by Till Swan. And this is important to me for this full moon because being conjunct Saturn, there is often going to be a hard truth that many of us need to hear. So you got number 61. The art isn't very exciting, so I'm not going to hold it up. So let's see what number 61 says. What are you not seeing that is going to become clear at this full moon? Temporality. If you've drawn the sigil, what is preventing your progression is that you are either too attached to the temporal in general or to an aspect of the temporal. This has caused you to lose sight of the bigger picture, which includes much more than the temporal world. You might be looking for a solution that does not exist here in the temporal world. That is like looking for a lost key, but being convinced that the key is somewhere in one specific room and never finding it because the key you're looking for is not even in that room. The temporal world is a world of the purely physical. It is particles, body, color, shape, physical health, the aspect of sex, money, houses, place, things, foods, plants, pets, possessions. So basically Taurus. It is the realm of the material. If you've drawn this sigil, you may be so invested in the physical, unprovable, and rational, and even potentially the type of science that is purely focused on physicality, that you've forgotten that there is more to the universe than meets the eye. The physical world is not separate from spirit. It's a manifestation of spirit. You're denying the majority of the universe and actually the majority of yourself if you've invested in this way. It's calling you to an open-mindedness and a faith. To have faith is to have positive confidence or trust in something. It is to think something is true even without proof. Where there is evidence, no one speaks of faith. We do not speak of faith that 2 and 2 are 4 or that the earth is round. We only speak of faith when we wish to substitute emotion for evidence. Unfortunately, Russell was forgetting something. The person who believed the earth was round had to go on faith before there is proof to back it up. Many people believe that faith is the absence of doubt. This could not be further from the truth. We only think that faith is the absence of doubt because we confuse faith with knowing. To doubt is to have uncertainty about something. Faith cannot exist in a universe of certainty because certainty is knowing. Faith is not required when we know, and so if doubt is uncertainty, doubt is a necessary condition of faith. If we take doubt a step further, to doubt is to consider something unlikely, and this is to act as if you know something that you do not know, is to bring a sense of certainty to a universe of uncertainty. For this reason, doubt is the flip side of faith. Okay. So basically, this is telling me that there's too much of a concentration of your energy on what has manifested into the physical world, which is very common with Taurus. You know, this is a physical sign. It's an earth sign. It's associated with those things. And you now have Uranus, Mars, North Node here in your first house, mixing it up, asking you to be like, hey, girlfriend, your way of focusing on this physical world needs to shift. And that is ultimately going to awaken and shift certain life goals for you, or your way of pursuing or looking at those life goals. And it's not to say that you can't be going after money or that you can't do the things that you're currently doing. It might just mean that your perception of the way that things are going needs to change. Because this Nine of Swords in reverse to me is indicating that many of you, I think, have gotten down on yourself for not making leaps and bounds in your career. And that's going to happen when Saturn is in the 10th house. You are going to have some level of responsibility that you have to really step up and work hard, but you're not always going to get this really satisfied feeling from it until Saturn usually leaves. You're not going to feel like, I've done everything, I'm the best, I'm so confident, I get all the rewards. And sometimes you do get rewards. I'm not saying you can't grow and get rewards. I'm just saying you're in this longer process of kind of putting your head down, doing the grind, And that is not the most rewarding time in someone's career and life. And so I feel like you are maybe putting too much weight on like physical achievements. And I think you're going to start to see during this full moon that there's actually a lot more that you've achieved in terms of confidence, in terms of personal expression. I feel like you're really going to come alive in many ways as you detach a little bit more from the physical world and step into the spiritual world, where you realize, I feel more expressed in my career. I feel more confident because of how consistent and determined I've been. And this is where the Queen of Wands comes in. She's somebody who has the fire, the excitement, the burning energy within her that can come up with creative solutions that help her succeed. And it doesn't feel like she's just trudging along, which you may have kind of felt. So this Queen of Wands is trying to bring back your sense of inspiration. And so for some of you, becoming too attached to the physical or to a sense of security has taken away your inspiration. And I think that's why we have the inner child card here, because many of you guys may have been attached to the sense of security in order to make your inner child feel safe. You know, I'm going to meet your needs, little girl or little boy. I'm going to make sure that we have the money, the house, the things that we need to feel safe. And yes, that is important. And I think it's even more important for us to feel like our inner child isn't just safe, but she is expressive. She is thriving. She is uninhibited. And I think with Mercury and Virgo in the 5th, making a trine to Uranus in the North Node in your first house is going to bring that out of you. It's going to call you to have new ideas of how to express this childlike self. Also, Venus and Leo in the 4th house, making a trine to Neptune in the 11th, is going to tell me that many of your creative ventures are going to be things that you could do at home or with friends. You might have really beautiful relationships start to crop up here that bring about some of those kind of creative ideas and ventures. And with the opposition of Pluto in the 9th, I think you're really going to challenge some of your existing beliefs that you've had and understand more about kind of what it is you want to believe instead of the way that you've been viewing things prior to this. So that is essentially what I'm seeing for you, Taurus Rising. I hope that resonates. I think that with this Judgment card, you are having an awakening here. For some of you, that might involve some really big decisions in your career. And for some of you, it might just be a complete shift and change in your perspective. But regardless, there's an awakening happening. And more of your spirit is kind of coming back down into your awareness in your career life. So again, that's all I see for you, Taurus. If it resonates, please let me know by liking, commenting down below. I read all of your comments and they always mean a lot to me, even if I'm slow to respond. If you want an astrology reading, if you want to learn astrology, you can check both of those links out in the description box down below. And I hope you have a great day. Bye. All right. Up next, we have Gemini Rising. For you guys, the sun is in Leo in your 3rd house right now. So you guys might be particularly busy and inspired right now. And the moon is opposite it in the 9th house, along with Saturn conjunct the moon. So I think that what's interesting is I kind of want to start off before I even go fully into the astrology with this one card that I'm pulling for everyone, which is about what you are not seeing. It's the blind spot oracle. So essentially, what is it that is driving us or motivating us without us being aware? And that is really important for this full moon in particular because of the fact that Saturn is on the moon, which brings about a need to be clear and truthful about what is really happening right now. And so I think many of us are going to have some kind of, wake up call in some area of our life. And so I'm going to start off by reading that card and then we'll kind of dissect the astrology and how that all fits in. So you guys got the negative reinforcement pattern. If you've drawn the sigil, you are stuck in a negative reinforcement pattern. This pattern may be isolated to one situation or it may apply to your life in general. The reality is that you're doing what you're doing in order to avoid something that you don't want instead of doing what you're doing to get something you do want. In a sport, coaches are well aware that all athletes want to win, but some are motivated to win so as not to lose. Their athletic career, which is usually not very successful, is motivated by avoidance. Others are motivated to win because they love the feeling of winning. They usually do not perceive themselves to be facing the same risks and stakes when it comes to losing. For example, one athlete whose family only approves of them because they're competing and only when they're successful at it stands to lose the approval and closeness of their family if they lose a match or race. It will be very hard for them to focus on the benefits of winning because they are far outweighed by the risks of losing. If you've drawn the sigil, then either generally or in a particular situation, you are motivated by aversive stimuli. You have a tendency to avoid the source of any adverse situation, even if that source would benefit you. Running away from potential painful circumstances and doing things simply to avoid consequences is exhausting. It leads to resentment. It's the exact opposite of seeking pleasure. It also leads you to being lost in life without a definitive direction because you don't have a firm grasp on what you actually want. Instead, you have a firm grasp on what you don't want. Okay, so ask yourself, what is it that I do want? And then stop doing the things that you don't want to do that are nothing more than a way to avoid negative consequences. So when I think about this is interesting with Saturn because Saturn typically has this heaviness around expectation, whether it's our own expectation, an internalized one from our family, from society. There is a belief system that we expect that we have to meet a certain achievement or meet a certain standard or meet a certain ideal or do something in a certain way in order to be successful, in order to be happy. And so this card to me is indicating that with the full moon with Saturn in the ninth, there is a reworking right now around your belief systems and around the traditions of these kind of expectations. And again, many of you could be, like this card says, motivated by negative beliefs. So I'm going to work really, really hard because I'm scared that people are going to think that I'm not enough. Or I'm going to pursue this thing because I'm scared of doing the thing that takes more of a risk. And this is more secure. So really sitting down and asking yourself what area of life this could apply to, because there's an underlying belief at the core of it that is saying that you have been maybe stuck a little bit in terms of your fear and inadequacy in a cycle or in a pattern or doing something in a certain way that is ultimately not benefiting you and not authentic to you. And this full moon is making a square to Uranus and Mars in the North Node in your 12th house. So that is indicating to me there is a huge need to release the sense of baggage, the sense of essentially there's like a surrendering to kind of whatever happens, not feeling like you have to control things or step into a certain way of doing things, but allowing things to unfold. And like this card was saying, maybe sometimes you will get negative consequences, and that's just kind of how it is. And so allowing everything to unfold, but being motivated by positive desires and by positive consequences instead of by the fear is what is going to allow you to surrender to whatever happens. And so we are kind of rewriting a belief system here, and allowing the universe to have a little bit more space in working in our lives. And that's essentially where the magic will start to happen. And I think that's what Uranus and Mars in the 12th are ultimately doing, is it's liberating you from these kind of past karmic cycles, this old baggage of belief systems that really are weighing you down, so that you can just be light as a feather and pursue the things that feel good, and then not focus on the things that feel bad, essentially. And just know that if bad things happen, you have support from the universe to actually face them and to not be overcome by them, because sometimes we develop these belief systems out of fear and avoidance because we feel like we are not capable of handling this situation if it does happen. And I think the more that we train our brains to realize we have the support from spirit, we are capable of meeting any of these challenging situations, then the more we will be able to kind of leap without as much fear and needing to really have the rope kind of tied to us, keeping us small. And I pulled the transformation card. So I think many of you guys are feeling like you are being released. As I mentioned, you're like light as a feather, and there's butterflies just coming out of this person who has been bogged down and is weighed down by all these like plants and things that are on her. And there's butterflies just emerging from her. So there's this lightness that is emerging from you as you realize that you don't need to be fearful anymore. You can just live in this moment. You can just go after what you desire and not try to like manipulate and control the circumstances, as I've mentioned before. So I think that's what you guys are achieving greatly here. I also wanted to talk about your ruling planet, which is Mercury. It is now in the sign of Virgo, which makes it a much stronger planet. So it is now sort of functioning at its highest, and it's able to help you a little bit more, especially getting down into the nitty gritty, to the details, to the planning. Mercury is in your 4th house, and it's making a trine to Uranus and the North Node in your 12th house. So I think that this is really going to help you in a practical way understand how this release and this transformation is going to translate into your everyday life, especially in your like emotional center. So I think that this is going to, again, kind of give you the next steps of how to apply this. Like, okay, I'm not going to live in fear. So what does that look like? What are my new thoughts going to be? What are my new behaviors going to be? How does this actually translate into a practical reality? So that is very much Virgo, Mercury and Virgo energy. The 4th house also has to do with, I feel like, reorienting the home. And so many of you guys might even reorient your physical space to represent a decluttering of your mind and a loosening of this energy. So it might be like a very practical way. You guys are kind of tidying things up around the house, or it could be in a more emotional way of how is this now going to reflect emotionally when I'm no longer clenching, when I'm no longer holding and controlling, and I'm accepting the way that things are right now. You guys also have Venus in Leo in the 3rd house, making a trine to Neptune in the 10th. So many of you guys can have really beautiful conversations at this time. You guys can have really beautiful ideas come in that can help stimulate sort of more passion and hope and faith in the area of your career goals or your life objectives. So some of you guys might sit down and start journaling and think about all these amazing things that you can do in the future. But because it's Venus, I think many of us will find this through some kind of creative outlet instead of just writing. So, I mean, writing is creative, so that could work for you. But Leo often has to do with some kind of like more artistic thing that is not so like word oriented. But yeah, so many of you might have these like conversations or make art or do something out in your community. And then because of that, you start to realize that your career is like doing, like basically how you can translate that into feeling more excited and inspired with your career. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have super practical ways of bringing that into life, but it means that you're going to feel like, I had this conversation with this person and now I feel really good and I'm re-inspired in my career and my life goals to go out and do this thing. And then you kind of have to use the Mercury and Virgo to figure out what that could entail. Venus is also opposite Pluto in the 8th house, though. So many of you guys are going to be experiencing this kind of challenge of insecurities. So you might feel inspired in your careers and your goals, but then there might be part of you that's a little bit afraid to let your guard down and to trust and to have faith and to get excited about something. And so I feel like you guys are almost like reworking the mind in a lot of ways here. With the Page of Swords next to the King of Swords, I feel like you are having this really nice balance of the beginner mindset, like this very I feel like that's where inspiration comes from, is like anything is possible. Anything is on the table. When you have a beginner mindset, you don't know the difficulties and challenges that lie ahead. So you tend to feel like the world is your oyster and you can have whatever you want. And that's what I think the Page of Swords is bringing, these really great conversations with people, these really great ideas, this inspiration, and this kind of like lightness to all of this situation. But next to the King of Swords, there is a depth here. There is a truth here, an honesty, an understanding of fact and what is fiction. And so there's a big difference between these two areas of your life. And so I feel like what's going on at this time is you're going to have an interesting balance of the two coming into your life, where you can maintain this inspiration and lightness with the Page of Swords, but then also embody a more of a fact and a truth and honesty that will happen with Venus opposite Pluto, where you can really dive into yourself, and looking deeply into your past insecurities, or like kind of what has held you back. You're able to transform those things and see what is true about them, because sometimes our insecurities are like sort of based on granules of truth, and then they're blown out of proportion to something much bigger than they need to be. And other times there's nothing there, and it's something maybe rooted back in our history, or something that someone told us, and it's actually like a ghost or something that's haunting us in our life, not based on reality. And so I feel like Venus opposite Pluto, and even Saturn with the moon right now, is going to help bring a lot of clarity around what really is that truth, and help you see like if there is some foundation for some of these fears or insecurities, or if you can just fully release it. Because once we get down to the core of why something exists, it's a lot easier to deal with it, to handle it. And with the Ace of Cups, I feel like you guys are having this kind of new emotional reset as a result of all of this. And I think that there's a lot of creative and intuitive, almost like psychic energy that can come from a rebirth of Pluto in the 8th house here. And it's like you're doing this emotional purge. You're seeing what is true, what isn't true. And that is helping you align with a new belief system that is going to make you feel lighter and freer than ever before. So that is what I'm seeing for you, Gemini. If it resonates, please let me know by liking and commenting down below. If you want an astrology reading, definitely check that out on my website or down below in the description box. And I also teach astrology if you want to learn that from me. And I hope that you guys have a beautiful day. Bye. All right, up next we have my beautiful Cancer Rising. So you guys were the only ones so far that has gotten 2 cards for the blind spot. So this is going to be really important to talk about for this full moon in Aquarius in particular, because this full moon is conjunct Saturn, which is typically about some type of truth or reckoning with reality. And sometimes it's a harsher version of reality, or just seeing things without any kindness. And I think that that's kind of what's coming through in some of these cards, actually, is maybe a need to look at things through a really hardened lens. So for my Cancer risings, the sun right now is in Leo in your 2nd house, and the moon and Saturn, this truth bomb, is in your 8th house. And so I think this could be a really powerful time, even though these are not angular houses. This can still have a really strong impact, because I think a lot of us are re-questioning or reanalyzing, I should say, kind of our value system and what we are doing in our lives and how it aligns with our values. And that's because this full moon is making a square to these 3 points right here, or planets, points and planets, the North Node, Uranus, and Mars. And they're all in the sign of Taurus, which is related to our values. So what we really want to invest in, what we want to materialize, and we have to be selective as humans. As a species, we have to be selective in the things that we pursue, because if we just have so many things that we're going after, nothing will necessarily we won't be able to produce something strong enough that will help us move forward as a society. And so we have learned the art of discernment, and we have kind of intellectual ways for discerning what we value, but then also emotional and non-pragmatic ways through our intuition and spiritual self. So that's a lot about what I think you are discovering right now, is kind of realigning with your value system. And with the 8th house, you may have been kind of, I don't know, the 8th house is typically linked with a moment of crisis, especially with a full moon and Saturn here. There's usually some type of thing coming to a head. And it doesn't have to be a crisis per se, but I had pulled 2 cards specifically surrounding endings in your life. And that's what the 8th house is literally representative of, is a death and a rebirth. And you got the 2 cards that represent that. You got the 10 of Swords and the Death card coming out together. So the 10 of Swords is about that finite ending. And in representation of a soul, it's a soul's life on earth ending, and then the soul cannot go back into that body. It cannot go back into that life on earth. It must continue forward onto its next life. And so that is essentially what's happening here. Is there's a very definitive ending for my Cancer risings where you cannot go back to a previous state of being, which is going to be different for many of you, but there is some crisis or some completion or something that comes to a head that you're like, enough is enough. Or it just kind of resolves itself on its own, whether it's a free will or not. And it's just something that you are not going to pursue anymore, or that's falling out of your life, and you will not go back to it in the same way again. The Death card to me is really beautiful to come after this, because it's kind of like putting a nail in the coffin and saying, yes, that's exactly what I mean. I mean an ending. But what is happening after the Ten of Swords and the Death card is a rebirth into a new life as a new soul. And that's what I was talking about at the beginning with the overview, is that the Leo new moon really represented where we're going to start to have some new seeds planted that can then take over what is being lost at this time and take up the room and the space and grow, since there's more space, as I just mentioned. So the Death card to me is saying that there is a rebirth, something coming out of this situation, growing directly from kind of the compost and the things that have been created from this ending in your life. So that is a positive note to me. And I think I also pulled the growing card, and the fact that there's like a flower growing out of this skull. So there's something emerging in terms of life out of this death, out of this ending. And then we have these beautiful full flowers here. So I feel like this is trying to tell you that you're not meant to be afraid of what is ending, because you are going to bloom into so much more of yourself, into a better, brighter, more fulfilling version of yourself as a result of this ending in your life. So I think many of you are going to kind of come to terms with that around this full moon, and hopefully you'll be able to start recognizing where you have maybe turned a blind eye. And the reason I say that is because I think many of you have maybe tolerated something in your life, particularly in the area of friendships or community, that doesn't really sit well with you, actually. There's something that needs to innovate here or evolve here that has become either stagnant, held you back in some way, felt restrictive, felt negative on your energy and your life force. There is something about your current community and friendship situation, and maybe for some of you, even your long-term goals, but I think most is going to be for many of you around community, that again needs to have some kind of innovation, or again, the long-term goals, because I did pull the King of Pentacles. So, let me pull one more card to clarify, like if it's, because Mars and Uranus and the North Node are in your 11th house. And that's why I'm saying community. But for many of you, it might actually be long-term goals. I pulled the Hierophant card. That's like, that has to do with community, actually. Is this also about long-term goals for people with this King of Pentacles? Or is it pretty much just friends? I mean, I'm sure you guys can take whatever resonates. Anyway, I got the Four of Cups. Okay. Okay, I kind of feel like something else. There's some other message actually coming through here. I feel like, okay, so something that comes through with this being a full moon conjunct Saturn, is this heavy pressure on kind of like doing things the way things have always been done. That's what Saturn tends to bring. It's like, oh, I need to go to university because if I want to be taken seriously, I have to have XYZ degree. I have to go through these steps or these hoops in order to live a successful life, an abundant life. And I think that, again, this is kind of a separate message. I think that many of you are starting to realize that your way of looking at a situation was maybe too small, and that you are kind of rejecting, with the Four of Cups and the Hierophant, a traditional way of going about something. And with the King of Pentacles, I feel like it was something, the King of Pentacles is next to the Nine of Wands. So I feel like there is some like traditional path that you've been trying. Maybe it's a job that people are telling you to take, or maybe it's a way of going about work or life that is, or even a friend group that feels like the should, like I should be doing this and I should be doing that, and kind of conforming to what like the group tends to think, or what people around you tend to tell you, like your friends tend to influence on you, or even just your environment in general. And I feel like there are a group of you who are saying, no, like I don't want to necessarily follow this traditional path anymore, or I don't want to take this kind of laid out path. And that could be directly influenced by your friends somehow. So there's something about your friend group and your environment and your community that needs to evolve and change, whether that's their influence on you and how you're kind of been doing things, or whether that's the actual people or the energy. There's something that is they're contributing to your life, that is something like kind of foundational, important, and in your everyday life that I feel like you guys are like physically exhausted with. It's something like not sustainable. And I know this is like not super clear because this is a group message for everyone who has Cancer as their sun or their rising sign. So, but you guys are meant to put a stop to something in your life, likely in your friend group, or how your friend group is influencing your decisions about your job or your future, or something about your stability and goals. So there's something within the friend group or how they are influencing your way of doing things in terms of life objectives and responsibilities, that's not working, either one or the other, or both. And so I think that you have maybe turned a blind eye to this. Like, the reason I say that is because the first card that we have for these blind spot cards is blinding optimism. And this is really about having a positive outlook is a positive thing. It's a positive thing until you are using it to deny the negative. And so I think that some of you might be denying the negative about a current situation that you are in. So it's like not seeing the bad in the environment that you're in, not seeing the bad in the community or the friends that you have, or even in like the way that you've been doing things, or the way that you've been pursuing your goals, or like the way that people run their lives around you and influence you. It's like, oh, I love them and everything's great and they're doing great. And it's like, in reality, if you really think about their life, maybe you don't want to have their life and you're being influenced by the way that they run theirs. And it's time to check in with yourself and ask yourself if that's truly what you want. Because I think you'll realize that it's not what you want. And the next card that I pulled is a card around free will. So this is saying what you're currently not seeing is that you are out of touch with your free will. This means in your life in general, in the situation at hand, you need to take responsibility in some way and take actions as a result of that responsibility in order to feel free and empowered. I think that you want to embody this King of Pentacles, but there's something about it that's tiring you, that's exhausting you. And the feeling that I'm getting is the way that you are taking action in your life is not actually in alignment. And so it's draining you. There's something about it that's not right for you because you are influenced by external circumstances. And so what you need to realize is that you've been too optimistic about your group or the people that you are around you. And it's time to see things much more clearly, much more frankly, about how maybe what's actually driven you to kind of comply or to look at these things and turn a blind eye to them is actually a deeper insecurity, maybe a desire or a need to really belong, or maybe a fear that you're not good enough to go after the things that you want that are different from what your community wants. There's something that is like a deeper, baser need that is much more vulnerable and much more tender, that it has been the reason why you've been in this situation. So I think that part of what's happening right now with this full moon in the 8th house is recognizing that vulnerability, kind of parenting yourself around it so that you can make different decisions apart from the group and still recognize that you will meet your needs emotionally in that way. And then taking that responsibility and free will over kind of where things are going in your life, and how you want to do things. So not being influenced by others and feeling like that is the right way to go just because everyone else says it is. You truly do have free will. And even if this is a community setting or a friendship with many people, you don't have to necessarily worry about what other people think or what other people do, because at the end of the day, this is your life that you're living. And with the square with Mars and Uranus in the 11th house, that's what it's about. There's a rebellious quality to this energy. We're revolting against the way that we did things. And for you being in the 11th house, it's the way that others around you are also doing things and influencing you. It has a lot to do with the hive mind. So there is something that you've been kind of swept up in that you need to now awaken to and see very clearly and make choices that are different instead of fully living in whatever that reality is. Okay, you guys also have Mercury and Virgo in the 3rd house making a trine to this Uranus North Node aspect. So I think that you'll start to really have some awakenings in your conscious mind, maybe even through conversation with other people and outside influences, people outside of your normal circle, and kind of collecting information. And you're going to think like, oh, maybe this way of doing things isn't the right way. Maybe I have had my lens kind of distorted by this set group of people when there's in reality another way of doing things outside of this group that is much more in alignment with me. You also have Venus and Leo in the 2nd house, and it's making a trine to Neptune in the 9th, and it's opposite Pluto in the 7th. So this is where I feel like you're going to have to really sit in and own your value and your belief systems. Like, this is what I believe. This is why I believe it. This is truly what's best for me. This is how it's going to enhance my life. And I'm confident enough and I believe in myself enough to maintain this despite the group, which is Pluto in the 7th. That's that fear of other people's reactions, fear of things from the outside, from others essentially influencing you in some way that you're not wanting. So it's really holding your firm ground to do something that resonates with you more on a soul level. So that's very specific message. I hope that does resonate for you guys, but I definitely am seeing a change up in the atmosphere that you're currently in, especially in regards to your relationships and your future goals or the kind of ways that you're pursuing things in your life. And I hope that you guys are willing to look at this and stand strong in this truth, because it's going to help you tremendously. So if that resonates, please let me know by liking and commenting down below. And if you want an astrology reading from me, you can always book one on my website, willisboom.com, or you can join my astrology course if you want to do all this for yourself. Okay, thanks. Bye. All right, up next we have my wonderful Leo rising. So this one I've kind of been like keeping my eye on for you guys in particular, because my boyfriend is a Leo rising, but also because this one is in the angular houses for you. So the sun is in your 1st house right now, which is really great in terms of career, recognition, feeling more powerful, feeling more energized, having more of the spotlight on you. And the moon right now is opposite the sun with Saturn conjunct it in the 7th house. So there's usually some sort of wrapping up or an ending or a challenging situation that can occur from other people. And what I feel like, based off of these cards, what I feel like the ending is to a way of relating to people. And for some of you, that could be ending relationships with people. But I feel like for many of you, it's not necessarily ending the relationship itself. It's ending the way that you relate to people. So whether that is, wanting... Okay, I'm just going to go straight into what this card says instead of acting like it's my own information, because I did pull some cards that specifically have to deal with our blind spots, and you got 2 of them. And the very first card is about our self-concept, which makes a lot of sense with the sun being in your 1st house. The 1st house is our self-concept as well as the sun. So it's really drawing your attention to a certain development in this area of your life. So a different way of seeing yourself, and kind of like the way that others see you as well. And so what this card says is that your blind spot is your desire to see yourself and for other people to see you as a good person. The ego is a singular identity that you call by your name. It's an amalgamation of all the things you identify with. Because we are raised in a relationally dependent society in which our survival depends upon each other. The only way for ourselves to survive is if we are in good favor with the rest of the social group. Okay, so there is like a strong desire for approval thing here, and to believe that you are a good person. And it's saying like to stay aware that we are perfectly capable of having mixed motives. We can have motives that are beneficial to those involved at the same time as having motives that are detrimental to those involved. The world is not black and white. So I feel like what this is trying to say here is that there may be some kind of facade that you could have been wearing or owning where you really wanted to be seen in a certain way. You want to be like the right one, the good one, the one that people look up to, the one that people enjoy. Not having issues with people, maybe people pleasing so that you can fit into this mold or to this identity. Or if you're not even people pleasing, it's just a desire to be perceived in a way that you are a pleasant person, which is something that everyone wants and is totally fine. But it becomes detrimental when we are not able to see the truth about ourselves, and kind of the nuances or the complexities of our nature. And also when we only want to see the good, we can push our shadow away, and it almost is like it grows bigger. When the less that we recognize the darker sides of ourselves, the more they actually take hold. And so I think that there has been some desire to be perceived well, or this desire to be the good one, that is now coming up to the surface during this full moon, where you are having to put a stop or an end to something. And I think that you might have to be a little bit of the bad guy. You might have to be like put in a situation in which there is combativeness or discomfort, because this moon in particular is making a square to Uranus, Mars, and the North Node, which are in your 10th house. So this might particularly come through your career area. You might have some competitive stuff happening in your career, or there might be like an authority figure in your career life, and you can no longer just bend over backwards and be the nice guy. You can no longer just do what everyone says you like that they want you to do. Or if there's a leader in your community, you're no longer just willing to just sit there and listen and, take the blame for things, or whatever kind of criticism comes, or, whatever could happen at this time. I mean, I'm not going to try to predict every possible thing. It's all going to look different for everyone, but there's going to be some harshness going on in a relationship with somebody where I think that they're going to look at you differently as a result, and it's going to maybe trigger some parts of you that want to be perceived as a Leo rising in this kind of kingly way. A Leo rising wants to be perceived well. There's a lot of ego associated with Leo, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but when out of balance, it can be. And so I feel like this is kind of checking you and giving you a situation in which your ego is almost brought down or is challenged in some way, where you're like, oh, okay, I may have to stick up for myself in a way that creates an enemy. I may have to be a competitor to this person and not be liked. I may have to be considered as bad or whatever as a result of my actions and me sticking up for what is right for me. And I have to be okay with that. And it's like, it's a lot to kind of process. It's interesting because the next blind spot card that I have is self-harm. If you've drawn the sigil, you are currently self-harming, and the self-harming you are engaged in is not benefiting you or anyone else in the situation. Instead, it is keeping you stuck. There's always a positive motive for our self-harming behavior. We might be telling ourselves that if we punish ourselves, we will never make the same mistake again, or that we can do penance and be more likely to restore a sense of our own goodness. Wow. That's interesting that we just talked about that. We might be using self-harm as a white flag. If we grew up in antagonistic households, we often learn that if we wounded ourselves, other people would no longer have any occasion to wound us. We might be constantly criticizing ourselves, thinking that criticism will cause us to maintain perfection in our performance. You may be blaming yourself for something that wasn't your fault, just to avoid the powerless feeling of being a victim, or to stay close and to feel connected and loved by the person who hurt you. We might actually be hurting ourselves physically in some way, or we may be simply making decisions that harm us in favor of other people's best interests. Let me repeat that. We may be making decisions that harm us in favor of other people's best interests. Okay, that is exactly what I'm talking about here. You want to be perceived as a good person, a right person, doing the right things. You want to be pleasant and favorable and people please. But this card to me is telling me that there is going to be a situation that presents itself at this full moon where that is no longer going to be a possibility. You have been harming yourself by being maybe too pleasant and by prioritizing how everyone else feels and kind of not thinking about what you really need in a situation, and not pushing back in the ways that you truly need to push back. And so what's going to happen with this square with Uranus and Mars in North Node in the 10th house is there's going to be some kind of breakthrough or some kind of oppositional force that can specifically come through your career or some relationship with like an entity that feels larger than you, some authority figure. That's the 10th house kind of vibe, a father even, where there is some kind of like larger, like a perception at least of a larger entity than you that you have to stand up against or say no to. Maybe your boss, you're saying, no, I can't do that thing because this is actually harming me to work that hard or do this much or and so we can see that here with the 7 of Wands and 3 of Cups. The 3 of Cups is this pleasantry. It's having fun, having drinks, enjoying time with people, getting along well. And the 7 of Wands is a competitiveness. It's a card that can come about when someone is blamed for something, when there's fighting over something, just general misunderstandings, looking at each other in negative ways, or someone looking at you in an unexpectedly negative way, which can take you off guard and ruin the kind of pleasantness that has been happening with this joyous, celebratory, connected card. And so what I see here is you guys like kind of having this sour situation that's going to be uncomfortable for you. But ultimately what it's going to do with this Fool and this Comfort card is lead to this massive revolution within you, where you are then able to stand up for yourself in the ways that you need to. Because once you start to use your voice, it's like a muscle. Once you start to practice those boundaries, sticking up for yourself, stopping the people pleasing, thinking about yourself, stop being okay with people not liking you, being okay with being perceived as a bad guy, being okay with butting heads and having people look at you differently. Once you're okay with that, it's like you become invincible in a way. You're no longer kind of dragged down by the expectations of others. You can just live your life for you. And this is a full moon in your 1st and 7th house, trying to draw the attention to what you need to create in your life for you. And that's why you had a new moon in your sign just 2 weeks earlier, which is the planted seed for what you want to create and what you want to grow. So go back and watch that video if you haven't yet, because that is what is going to grow in its place when you have set these boundaries for yourself. And I pulled the Fool and the Comfort card to indicate this brand new beginning. And what's interesting is I feel like this Comfort card is saying that maybe at first you will feel uncomfortable doing this thing, right? It's going to feel strange. That's the Fool card. It's going to feel new, but I feel like the angels are by your side, and you're going to have individuals who will also stick up for you and who will be here for you and who agree with you. And I think it's those people in your corner, or those angels or family members, whoever it is in your corner, that are going to make you feel empowered to hold these boundaries and realize that it's okay that some of these people fall away, some people don't like you, some situations arise that feel, conflict oriented. It's okay to have those things happen and become tumultuous, because you have the groundedness, the steadiness, the support and love that are continued through other people that you actually care about, or through people, maybe you do care about this person who thinks negatively of you in this situation, but it's like in the end, they are actually going to respect you more. Or even if the situation, they don't end up liking you that much, like it's okay, because the people that you really love and that are truly meant to be in your life will comfort you, will be there for you. And so I feel like it's relinquishing this need to be perceived a certain way in order to live much more authentically, and much more healthily as well. So you're not kind of bending over backwards and hurting yourself for the well-being of others. And lastly, really quick, you have Mercury and Virgo in the second house, and it's going to be making a trine to the Uranus North Node in your 10th house. So this is really great for having kind of these breakthrough conversations about what's going on in your career or within this relationship that's shifting. And it's also great for thinking of new ways to make money. So if some of you do have kind of like different, like if you're like, I'm not going to work in this way anymore, and there's a repercussion because of that, I think many of you will find new innovative ways to make money as a result, and you don't actually have to worry about your finances. You also have Venus and Leo in the first house, and it's making a trine to Neptune in the 8th. So this is asking you to transform from the inside out, to confront your insecurities and to heal them. And Venus is also making an opposition to Pluto in the 6th. So this can bring about, again, some trouble within your day-to-day life, some challenge and pushback in terms of your day-to-day routine. You might have people within the workplace and things like that kind of bothering you. But ultimately, if you can surpass that, you will find so much liberation and comfort on the other side. So that's what I'm seeing for you, Leo Rising. If that resonates, please let me know by liking, commenting down below. I read all of your comments, even if I am delayed, and they mean a lot to me. They are like my favorite thing about YouTube ever. And if you want an astrology reading, you can always get one on my website, willsboom.com. I also have the link down below. And if you want to learn astrology, I have an entire course, very cheap in my opinion, for how much I've spent on learning all this information and distilling it. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely check that out down below as well. And I hope you have a great day. Bye. All right. Up next, we have my Virgo risings. So this Aquarius full moon, which is happening on August 11th, will be taking place in your 6th house, which means that the sun is in your 12th house right now. And that makes a lot of sense, actually, because I've been so tired and I just have not really been wanting to hang out with people. And I think and I literally was wondering, I'm like, is the sun in my 12th house right now? And yeah, that's it. Just generally when we have the sun in 12th, our inner world starts to be lit up and starts to bloom. And that usually means our external world starts to kind of calm down. It's usually around like August and September, kind of before the sun passes over my rising sign, that I feel just way less connected to people and not even really desiring to. So if that's how you're feeling right now and you're not as energetic, that's totally normal for this period of time. But this is generally going to be a difficult axis to have a full moon on, especially because it is conjunct Saturn, the moon itself, and it's making a square to Mars, Uranus, and the North Node in your 9th house. So I feel like you guys are interestingly enough going to be challenging your current way of viewing things right now. And I pulled some cards that to me represented that. And what's interesting is that I'm getting with these cards a lot of emotional processing, which generally is going to remind me of relationships, relating to other people, understanding people, and needing to view that differently. However, you don't have a ton going on in your 7th house besides this Venus in the 12th making a trine to Neptune in the 7th, which is going to kind of bring about positive energy for the most part. So I'm wondering kind of where this is going to come in for you. Because I feel like there's some kind of emotion that you are processing that it was like a misunderstanding and then you're getting it. And that's interesting because having a full moon with the sun in the 12th, it's like lighting up what we couldn't see before. The 12th house is where our secrets go to hide, where we push things from our unconscious. And often when I see, this is just a tangent, but often when I see the ruler of the 7th house in the 12th house or Venus in the 12th house, there will be like infidelities or hidden things of the relationship that doesn't appear till later, like mental health issues that were not clear. And it's often maybe clear to other people, but not the individual. So there's maybe something in our life right now that is clear to other people in our lives that hasn't been clear to us, that we haven't fully been able to awaken to because maybe there's something about our soul consciousness where we weren't ready for that information. And so I feel like you guys are having something awaken within you. And sometimes that can stir up a bit of anxiety, a bit of pessimism, especially with Saturn with the moon. We can start to be a little bit overly critical with ourselves. And I think that as a Virgo rising, there's already this nature. So you might find that there's some way that you are having to overcome this, where you may need to liberate yourself from this kind of innate tendency, once something has come to light that you've misunderstood about yourself or haven't known about yourself, to just immediately like attack the self or view yourself negatively. So there will be maybe a need to overcome this natural tendency. So I kind of want to pull some more cards to see specifically what the situation is about, because I'm getting a lot of like relationships and conflict. Okay, King of Swords. Okay. So what I feel like is happening is that let me actually start off first with this blind spot card, and then hopefully this will make sense and I can pull this all together. So the blind spot card I'm bringing up in this blind spot oracle deck because Saturn is generally going to bring harsh realities and truths to light, as we've already been talking about, and so it feels very fitting to have this in our reading. So you got 43 assumptions. If you've drawn the sigil right now, you are assuming, and just so happens that what you are assuming is wrong. We assume things about situations or people based on how similar they are to a model, example, or prototype we've already built in our minds. For this reason, assuming is a form of stereotyping. The mind works like a computer in this way. If you meet a nice person from a particular country, you might be prone to assuming that everyone is nice from that country. To assume is to take something for granted or to suppose that something is true without having any proof other than your own comparison to a pre-existing model. Because we tend to project our own sense of reality onto other people, we also tend to assume things about other people without even talking to them to confirm whether we are right or wrong. I feel like your assumptions in regards to other people are being challenged right now. I don't know why this is coming up in the 6th house in particular, because the 6th house it's not so much about like relationships, that's more like the 7th and 11th house, but it is about cooperation and like working together to achieve an end goal. And it can also be a hierarchical house, so having people work under you. So it might come up in that particular area of your life. Like there might be a misunderstanding with people that you work with, where you are assuming something that's actually incorrect. The other thing that I would think about with this is that you are trying to achieve something with someone, or you want to work together with someone, and there is a breakdown where you're assuming something that's incorrect and conflict arises. And then lastly, the other thing that I could think of here is that the way that you're kind of processing things mentally, especially since I pulled the King of Swords as an important card here, the way that you're processing information and how it's aligning with your beliefs is, like this card is saying, is kind of projecting a reality onto the situation rather than reflecting the true reality. And because this full moon in the 6th is making a square to Mars and Uranus and the North Node in the 9th house, there's a need to shift the belief system, to shift the ultimate view or paradigm or perspective in order to make room for information that does not just align with your current reality. Therefore, you're able to then not just rely on assumptions that are incorrect, but to make room for more information to come in to see the objective reality of a situation. And sometimes Virgo in the 6th house can be so zoomed in into like a daily activity or to information about one's body or one's health or one's workplace, to be so zoomed into those kinds of environments that you lose, that it's easier to be biased in those areas, because you lose touch with the larger perspective and the larger truth about what's going on. And the reason I think for many of you this is coming up in relationships in particular is because I pulled the Knight of Cups, Five of Swords, and King of Cups. So Knight of Cups, Five of Swords, to me, this could be a romantic relationship for some of you, or something that brings something that you're more emotional about, or more like idealizing, because that's kind of like the Knight of Cups, where we start to see things in this kind of twisted way, where we might think that things are better or worse than they actually are. Usually better, because it's the Knight of Cups. Regardless, there's something that comes up that is emotionally charged between you and another person, that with the Five of Swords is going to bring about some kind of conflict. You're disagreeing with someone, there's a misunderstanding, and I feel like it's coming from an assumption that you have made about this person or this situation. And then from that, you then learn with the King of Cups how to intuitively navigate a situation. So it's kind of like, for example, you have a crush on someone and you think that that person likes you back, and then you realize that they don't. And there's all these assumptions here that lead you to think a certain way. And then you have the realization that what is actually happening. And you're then able to kind of be much more in tune with reality in an emotional way, if that makes sense. So you're not living in an emotional, idealistic place. You're seeing what's really in front of you, and you're able to process things and communicate your needs and your wants, because you're able to see the larger perspective and not assume things. And with Mercury and Virgo in your first house making a trine to Uranus in the North Node in your ninth house, this is going to help awaken this knowledge and information about you and about your belief systems, and the need to then shift that. And I think that's going to come rather easy for you because of this placement. You guys also have Venus and Leo in the 12th house making a trine to Neptune in the 7th. That can be kind of where the idealism can happen in relationships. But with the opposite of Pluto in the 5th, with Venus opposing Pluto in the 5th house, I think this is where you may encounter just things not quite living up to your immediate expectations and immediate desires. And so that is where you may have to kind of navigate something in a more realistic way. But I feel like even though this is uncomfortable, possibly with this Five of Swords, and breaking our current patterns of assumptions, with this Infinite Potential card, I feel like you're learning and growing a lot from this experience. And because of this, you're actually going to be able to have much more authentic relationships, because you're able to see kind of what's really going on and not color with a lens the situation in an inaccurate way, and therefore react inaccurately and have negative outcomes or uncomfortable outcomes. You're able to actually like connect with reality, and because of that grow from that kind of circumstance. So very odd situation for a 6th house moon. It feels like it's very heavily influenced by this Venus Neptune trine happening. I'd be curious to see if this is something that resonates for you guys, or if you have an alternative explanation for this moon in particular. Maybe for some of you, there could be some endings or beginnings in the area of work. That's always possible too. But it's ultimately going to have to change the way that you view things because of the square with the ninth, these planets in the ninth house. So this is interesting too, because I actually did apply for a teaching job, and the ninth house has to do with teaching. The 6th house has to do with a job. So I'd be curious to kind of see how that would manifest. So there can be like much more literal examples like that, but I also wanted to offer what the cards are saying, and kind of see if it can blend in with the astrology, because there is, I think, a lot of nuance that's happening here for the Virgo risings that is not so easily contained in a specific message. So please do let me know, Virgo rising, if you have an alternative explanation. Really, that is going to benefit me so much for my practice. And I hope that you guys have a beautiful day. If you want an astrology reading, you can get one from willsboom.com or using the link down below. And I hope you have a great day. Bye. All right, up next we have my beautiful Libra risings. So this full moon in Aquarius is happening along your 5th, 11th house axis with the sun in your 11th house. And the moon is conjunct Saturn in your 5th house. So quite an intense energy coming from this moon, this kind of finiteness, this seriousness that comes with Saturn being in the equation. And I wanted to talk specifically about a blind spot there that we're all kind of now uncovering or encountering because of the fact Saturn is here. Saturn is the truth bearer, the reality, the sometimes harsh reality of a situation in which we're forced to encounter it through, life obstacles or anything like that. So I pulled a card for you specifically about your blind spot, and it is the separation card. So if you draw the sigil, you are seeing yourself as separate to others. You're seeing yourself as different, and you've maybe forgotten or denied that the outside is a reflection of the inside. You're not seeing that you are part of the universe and that the universe is part of you. You're not seeing that what is happening in your external world is a reflection of you. You're not seeing that as a fractal of this universe, everything you see in the outer world is also inside of you. The mirroring that is inherent in the universe, which is a byproduct of the truth of oneness, is not something you are currently seeing. It makes you comfortable in the scenario to separate me from them. It makes you more comfortable to play a game of us versus them. Okay, so, that's a lot. Anywho, I'm not going to go into all the details of that, but there is something here where you are separating yourself from the oneness, which is interesting to have your sun transiting the 11th house right now. There is a sense of belonging here, a sense of being a part of something larger. And when this card comes up, it's like you are now finally starting to see the truth of this nature, of you belonging to the universe, of belonging to a larger group, of identifying with the people around you, of seeing yourself in others around you. I say specifically others because the 11th house has a lot to do with people who have similar interests and similarities as us, and we're finally able to really see those similarities. And that is what helps us sink into the sense of belonging and familiarity and comfort and community. And so I think many of you have felt like an outsider in some way, shape, or form in your life, in some area where you've considered yourself different. And maybe that was to, protect yourself in some way, or maybe that was an ego thing. Regardless, it doesn't matter. I feel like what is happening right now is a newfound harmony with yourself and your environment with this card appearing. I feel like it's you, when you think about harmony, or even resonance, like when you hear notes that have the same resonance, they will flow together. There is an ease, there is a combination and an enhancement of these sounds together. And when you hear sounds that don't resonate, they quite literally, the sound waves will hit each other and almost like grind past each other. It reminds me of like a car with like really squeaky brakes. It's like it's trying to fit or work and it's not fitting and working. And what I feel like is happening is maybe there was some aspect of your life that felt like that it was grinding, that it wasn't harmonizing, that it felt like a separation or a differentness in the resonance between you and someone else, or you and your environment. And maybe you and a romantic partner, a friend, a place, an activity. It doesn't have to just be friends. It could be anything that you felt different or separate or not resonant with. And I feel like that is resolving itself. You're starting to see yourself reflected in that thing that you are interested in or involved in, or that person. And because of that, because of your ability to see the likeness there, it's going to create that resonance and amplify your connectedness and the harmony between both of you. So the moon in the 5th house with Saturn is making a square to Uranus, Mars, and North Node in the 8th house. So I feel like there was something here where maybe in a social circle or social setting in particular, where you were just meant to like enjoy yourself, but there was something about an insecurity within you, or a fear within you, a fear of betrayal, a fear of being hurt, a fear of being judged, a fear of being vulnerable, that brought out within you, even in an unconscious way, that desire for separateness, or this innate feeling of separateness. And that's what sometimes Saturn can do. It can create a separation or a divide, Saturn and Mars. And so I feel like this part of you is there, but it's being resolved, or it's being changed in some way. So it feels like a lot of newness, like a lot of growth, especially because I pulled so many really positive cards that can indicate that you are no longer in adversity with your environment or with the people around you. Things are flowing, things are moving, and it feels like less constricted. So I pulled the Fool card, the Magician, and the Wheel of Fortune. And these are all really positive cards for manifesting a new reality. Especially with the Magician next to the Wheel of Fortune, it really feels like it's something that's self-initiated. So you have this kind of new lens or new way of viewing a situation in regards to your likeness with others, in regards to the serenity and harmony in a situation or environment with others. And because you are viewing it in this more childlike way, this more innocent way, this more accepting, open-hearted, loving way, and kind of battling the insecurities that could have been there, you are then able to change what you want to change in your life with this Magician Wheel of Fortune card. Maybe something really wasn't going your way, and now you're able to start having things move faster, move better, more at ease. Like, I'm just getting that idea of a vision of like a greased wheel that is like moving with ease. It's not those squeaky brakes, right? There's a harmony here that you have worked for just by changing your perspective or allowing yourself to kind of have a new mindset. And so I feel like that's really coming in strongly here. You guys also have Mercury and Virgo in the 12th house making a trine to Uranus and Mars, or Uranus in the North Node in the 8th house. So I feel like this is you shedding your old mindset, allowing that to drop and to fall and to be reborn as this Fool card with baby eyes, now able to see things clearer and differently than before. You also have Venus and Leo in the 11th house making a trine to Neptune in the 6th. This is going to ultimately enhance the ability to work together with the people around you and to have more positive relationships with those around you on a mundane day-to-day level. However, Venus is also opposite Pluto in the 4th. So you are still battling you have to battle essentially some of your emotional ties to these previous experiences or to this previous viewpoints and previous emotional habitual reactions to things. The 4th house is where we have been kind of shaped and molded by our past and our history to react unconsciously and habitually a certain way. And so this might be something that has been fueled by your past pain, by your past insecurities, and now you're having to kind of dig that up, combat that, change your worldview a little bit. And as a result, you are then creating a very harmonious relationship with others and with your environment that I think is ultimately going to benefit you tremendously and allow you to be successful in a way that you don't have to struggle against the things around you anymore. It's just an ease, a flow, and a harmony that I'm seeing very strongly here. So that's why I'm seeing Libra Rising. If that resonates, please let me know by liking, commenting down below. If you want an astrology you can check one out from willsboom.com or using the link in the description box down below. And I hope you have a great day. Bye. All right, up next we have my beautiful Scorpio risings. So for you guys, this full moon in Aquarius is happening in your 4th and 10th house axis. So that means the sun is in your 10th house and the moon conjunct Saturn is in your 4th house. I think that you guys might be having some big emotional realizations because of this. Whenever we see a full moon in the 4th house, there can be some kind of chapters ending or closing in relation to something around family ties, family history, emotional ties to past events, ways that you process things emotionally, as well as kind of what's going on within your home environment, relationships with family members, and just the physical home as well. So many of you might have some kind of resolution or something coming to a head in this area of your life. And in particular with this full moon, we are having kind of this truth bomb in a way where we are seeing things with a harsher but more realistic mindset that's coming from the moon being conjunct Saturn. Saturn is a planet of honesty. And so I think that many of you guys will maybe need to hear the message that I'm about to give you, which is going to be related to this blind spot oracle deck. So everyone has had a blind spot card pulled for their reading. And so I pulled number 29 for you, which is wanting to be right. So this is going to somehow be tied into the overall message of this full moon for you. Okay. If you've drawn the sigil, you are not clearly seeing that either consciously or subconsciously, you're wanting to be right more than you're wanting anything else. The truth in the situation is that it doesn't matter if you're right or not. You might be very wrong in the scenario or very right. Either way, what matters is that you're valuing being right over everything else, and that will lead to pain. It is a warped priority to have if you want genuine improvement to take place. If you're valuing being right over effectiveness, you need to ask yourself what your goal is. What do you want to get out of being right? This is super important, and I'm going to read most of this because I think it's very insightfully written by Teal Swan. In relationships, especially when it comes to conflict resolution, this will get us into a lot of trouble. It will make finding a solution impossible because you want to be right, and it will lock us into a struggle of ego versus ego. We need to ask ourselves if we want to be right or have success, if we want to be right or have connection, because these things are often opposed. What we tend to do when we're defending our position is that we get louder as we feel ourselves losing ground relative to something that is important to us. We talk over others, we interrupt, we shut others down, we try to convince everyone that we're right. It's akin to an alternate reality experience because we get feverish like a dog with food aggression over a bone. If you've drawn the sigil, you have to let go of the need to be right and instead look to be understood. To do this, you'll have to put effort into understanding others, listening to them, seeing them, feeling them. When you do that for others, they will want to do it for you too. Everyone has important opinions, perspectives, and information to share. You will soon find that the reward of actual connection will trump the feeling of being right and proving that you are right. So I think for many of my Scorpio risings, there is something very cutthroat about your nature, with Mars being the traditional ruler of your rising sign and of your chart. Mars is definitely desiring to overpower situations and to be the one that's right. And it can be very inflexible or stubborn in its attempt to succeed at that. It can also cut people out or fight against people in an unnecessarily aggressive way to defend itself and protect its ideals and desires. And so this is what we are combating against right now with this full moon. This is what I think you're starting to realize, a habitual tendency to do this, because Saturn in the fourth house, along with this moon, is indicating habitualness, the way I've always done things, the way I've always reacted to things, my instinct that has been kind of cemented in me over the years of my family treating me a certain way, maybe not being heard. And it creates this defensiveness, which I see in people who want to be right. They're just defending their opinion instead of actually getting down to the core of what they're truly desiring in this conversation. And so what I see here with this releasing card is that you guys are releasing something off of your chest. There's this light coming off of this person's heart. And I feel like you guys are coming to terms with something emotionally and seeing the truth about a situation, releasing the need to be right, releasing pent-up emotions, releasing everything that you might be holding against someone or holding against yourself or a situation, and actually being able to authentically listen and understand someone and have that person listen and understand you. And so that's what I feel like is happening here, especially because this full moon is making a square to Mars, Uranus, and the North Node in your 7th house. So this is directly impacting your one-on-one relationships, your ability to open up emotionally and see someone else's perspective, and then be vulnerable and not defensive for them to see your perspective. Because the second we get defensive, people don't listen. And so we're both just kind of defending our own views. And there usually has to be someone that has the white flag, the someone that wants to take the step first and listen, because that person truly desires that connection. And so I think many of you are going to face a situation where you're being asked to let go of some of your fieriness. With this 4 of Cups and the Knight of Wands, I feel like you've been a Knight of Wands kind of responding with fire in an impulsive way. Knight of Wands in particular, very fast moving. They're very quick to, again, like cut off or defend or say no. The walls go up really fast and the aggression comes out very fast. And so what I'm seeing with the Four of Cups here is a rejection of that situation, a rejection of this type of reaction that I feel like you are now undergoing, and you're now essentially being okay with that, with slowing things down, looking at things differently. You are rejecting your natural impulses and habitual way of behaving, which is represented by the moon and Saturn in the fourth house. Ultimately, I feel like this is going to give you a lot more harmony because you have Mercury in the 11th making a trine to Uranus in the North Node in the 7th. So there's a bridging of understanding, a creation of community, of a bond here, of a likeness here. And this bond and community likeness can only be created when you are willing to see past your own perspective and step into the other's shoes. Because maybe you have a certain need that's being unmet. Maybe you have a certain thing that you feel is unheard, but maybe that other person does too. And so what you're not willing to recognize initially is that maybe your defensiveness is preventing you from seeing that other person has the same struggles as you, just in a different form. And because of that, you're not able to come together. And so I think that this full moon is going to help bridge that gap to create these breakthrough conversations and realizations about one another's needs and create that sense of likeness again, where you realize we do have the same things going on, just in a different guise. I also see the Justice and the Knight of Pentacles here. Ultimately, what I think this is going to achieve is a sense of fairness and balance and a stability within the relationships. You're moving from a Knight of Wands to a Knight of Pentacles. You're moving from reacting very quickly and impulsively and fiery to investing into something, to taking things slow and steadily and practically, to not get caught up in emotion, in a reactiveness around boundaries. That's what I think about the fire and Mars, is someone saying, no, like that's my lawn, like don't pee on my lawn, or I'm going to protect this part of myself. It's a lot of self-preservation. And Mars is this warrior planet that's willing to fight for that self-preservation. And the Knight of Pentacles is much more trusting that he himself is strong and capable, and that these circumstances or these different beliefs or people saying different things or these misunderstandings are not going to encroach upon his safety and security. And because of that, he is able to approach the situation with slowness, with thoughtfulness, with practicality, and understand that there is not an actual threat there, that just because there is someone not maybe seeing or understanding them, that they can actually be vulnerable still and be willing to see that person still and not become defensive. And they will find that in return, they get more understanding and more vulnerability. And it solidifies this way of being that I am safe regardless of how others react or think. And because of that, I can approach the situation calmly and from self-assurance. And again, from a practical mindset about what I truly want to get out of the circumstance, and from a calm manner. And so that is how I feel like you guys are being, especially with this Justice card. You are willing to see both sides of the coin. You are willing to be fair now. And I think before you were much more reactive and defensive and not willing to be fair. And again, what you give is what you get. So you will find that from your environment, from the people around you, that is the kind of response you're going to get as a result. So if you're defensive, you'll get defensive. If you are fair and balanced and trying to hear someone out, you will notice that they will hear you out. Maybe once they've kind of let go of what they've been carrying emotionally, but once they feel heard, they are going to be willing to hear you. And if not, if for some reason that's not the case, which will likely be the case, but if not, this Justice card is an indication that you can walk away knowing that you did everything in your power to be fair, to be just, and you can release these emotions off of your chest and know that you truly did what was in the best interest of both parties. You guys also have Venus and Leo in the 10th house making a trine to Neptune in the 5th house. So I feel like this is really beautiful for creating like a common goal or objective in your relationships. I also feel like this is really great for working together with somebody, or if you have like a specific creative vision that you want to bring to light, I feel like that's really positive with this. But with opposition with Pluto in the third, it's the communication. It's the way that you exchange ideas and talk about these things that needs to be really dealt with on a core level. And that's where some of the fears might come up, or some of the tensions might come up, is that when you start to work together with someone on something, you don't necessarily see eye to eye, and you have to kind of resolve that. So that's one way of looking at this. But regardless, if there's something that you're trying to bring to light, you're going to have to combat some of your internal dialogue in order to bring that to life, not to light. Okay, so that is what I'm seeing for you, Scorpio Rising. If it resonates, please let me know by liking, commenting down below. And if you want an astrology reading from me, you can always get one at willsboom.com or using the link down below. And I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye. All right, up next, we have my beautiful Sagittarius Rising. For you guys, this full moon in Leo, Aquarius is happening in your 3rd and 9th house axis, which makes a lot of sense with the cards I just pulled. That means the sun is in your 9th house and the moon is conjunct Saturn in your 3rd house. What do we get when we get a full moon in the 3rd house? A lot of brain activity. Add Saturn to the mix, it tends to be quite negative. And Saturn is a planet that focuses on kind of the truth and reality of a situation, but it can distort it into a way where we perceive it overly harsh and become worried or anxious. And so that's kind of what I'm getting with this full moon for you guys, is quite a bit of anxiety with the 9 of Swords in reverse. I think that you are going to overcome the anxiety. There is something that you're going to have a breakthrough with. But right now I feel like you're sitting in it, especially with the Devil card. These two really dark cards next to each other, ruminating, stressing, worrying. And I specifically am pulling a blind spot oracle card for each group. And for you, yours is around scarcity. So I think that this worriness is coming up because you're feeling like there's a lack of something. For many of us, it's a lack of money, but for some of us, it could be a lack of opportunities for jobs, for relationships, for anything in our life. There's this feeling of grabbing or holding on to things, or accepting less than we're worth, or settling in some way because of the scarcity that we're experiencing. And with Saturn in the 3rd house, there's a need to transform or transcend this way of thinking, especially because it is squaring Uranus, Mars, and the North Node in the 6th house. The 6th house tends to think about things in a very routine way, and it can absolutely lean towards a lot of anxiety and sometimes even like mental health issues. And so I feel like it's trying to have you break free from some pattern that you've been stuck in on a mental loop. And it might even suggest having some new ways of kind of going about your everyday to break out of these mental routines. Or alternatively, like a new job opportunity could arise that you have not fully considered because of this scarcity, or that you might settle for something before. Oh, sorry, this is a spider. I thought I already got him. You might settle for something when in actuality there's another opportunity coming your way that can be a lot more liberating and a lot better for you. So you guys are experiencing scarcity of some sort, and it says it's causing you to think, speak, and act in ways that don't benefit you or others. It may cause you to make choices that are not the right ones. And I feel like that's the important part here, is not necessarily, is there really enough? Is there not enough? Are you making the right choices as a result of your thought patterns? Because sometimes it's good to be practical and do what's called of us. And then other times we are just actually approaching a situation out of fear of what will happen if we don't get a certain need met, and then we settle or jump the gun, or I don't know, like we're just going to make a choice that's actually not in our best interest. If we could just have a little faith and trust that our needs can be met and that we can manifest the things that we're looking for, which this energy can do that. It is a very strong energy with Mars in the North Node and Uranus in the 6th house. You can manifest a job out of nowhere. And it can be very unexpected. So if you draw on the sigil, Look at things you are thinking and saying and doing when you perceive there to be scarcity. So we're very much not even just looking at our thoughts, but then what are we doing as a result or saying as a result of this thought? And if you've drawn the sigil, do anything you can to move into perception of abundance. So that seems quite obvious. So I think that this strength card is making a lot of sense now that I pulled, because I think it's a strength of being able to maintain your courage and your faith, even when your fear kind of creeps in and tells you things might not work out. You might not have enough. You might fall into the XYZ situation. You might not make enough money. So it's having the strength to see past those immediate concerns and to make decisions that are truly in your best interest. If your gut is telling you that something isn't right, but your fear is telling you to do it anyway, please listen to your gut, because sometimes it's really hard to distinguish between our intuition and our fear instinct. And so that's going to be something that I think you're going to have to be processing at this time. What is intuition and what is fear? Because it's a really big thing that humans have trouble kind of differentiating. You guys also have Mercury in Virgo in your 10th house, making a trine to Uranus and the North Node in the 6th house. So I really do feel like there can be some career moves or changes here for you, career ideas, or if it's not specific to career, it's something that's trying to help you move forward towards a particular goal in your life. And I feel like you're going to have some new opportunities crop up out of nowhere that will help progress you. And it's almost like you just have to believe that it's coming in order for it to appear. And I think it will appear kind of regardless, but I feel like you're just unnecessarily suffering with the Nine of Swords and Devil card. The Hanged Man is before the Nine of Swords and Devil. It's telling you to switch your perspective, to see things differently. And that means to see things from a place of abundance, see things happening, envision yourself having the thing that you want instead of fearing the thing that you don't want to happen. You also have Venus and Leo in the 9th house making a trine to Neptune in the 4th. So I think that this is going to help you step into that visionary energy and from a place of kind of emotional like emotional surge, like there's emotional like push behind it with Neptune in the 4th. Like I'm going to visualize and I'm going to feel into what it would be like if I had this particular circumstance. But the opposition, Venus is opposite Pluto in the 2nd. So you're going to have to combat those very kind of basic human instincts that is going to be scared for its survival. And it's going to want to react from that place. So you're going to have to combat that part of yourself in order to visualize what's to come. And I pulled the 9 of Cups. So this is a wish fulfillment card. You are going to get what you want, but I do think that you need to envision it, feel it. That's like everything that people say about manifestation. I know it's really overly discussed at this point, but in this particular reading, that's what this is about. You're living in too much of a fear and scarcity right now about some particular area of life not unfolding in the way that you want, and you're giving way too much energy to that. So you need to redirect that energy into the thing that you do want to happen, and I think that you'll be happy with the results. So that's what I'm seeing for you, Sagittarius Rising. If it resonates, please let me know by liking and commenting down below. That helps my channel get out there a lot more, and I do need that. And if you want an astrology reading, you can always book one on my website, willisboom.com, or using the link down below. Thanks. Bye. All right, up next we have Capricorn Rising. So for you guys, this full moon in Aquarius is happening in your 2nd house with the sun opposite it in the 8th. This full moon is conjunct Saturn, a planet of habit. The moon and Saturn are actually both planets of habits. And the 2nd house is a very stuck house. It doesn't have to be negative, but in general, it means that we tend to hold on to something that will cause self-preservation and security. And so this is where we have our baby blanket that we don't want to give up. This is where we decide not to change jobs for 10 years because we get a consistent income and pay, and we don't want to have to force ourselves to find something new, even though we're not actually fulfilled. So this is kind of what's coming to light right now, because for every person, I have been pulling a blind spot oracle card. And for you, you got number 56, which is the comfort zone. So this is very much Taurus second house energy, where this full moon is happening for you. There's a lot of like heavy, cemented, kind of stuck energy that with the square to Uranus, Mars, and North Node in the fifth house, it's calling you to finally take leaps towards what you really want. You have been every step of the way, all of these moons, all this stuff that's been going on recently, you've been being called to something that feels much more in alignment with your natural talents and gifts, which is a fifth house energy. This is how I am naturally, this is what I'm naturally good at, what I naturally gravitate towards, what I naturally desire in a partner, in a friend, in a job, in an experience, in a living situation, in anything in your life. This is what I gravitate towards, because this is how I do want to like put an asterisk there, because sometimes we'll gravitate towards things that are in our comfort zone or familiar, or that are ways of repeating past cycles. Like, there is a healthy gravitation towards something as a soul. Like evolutionarily, our soul is pulling us towards something, but our ego is gravitating towards something more familiar. And so that is the conundrum here, because your soul has been pushing you and pushing you and pushing you. And I think it's going to break at this full moon with this Saturn moon squaring Uranus, Mars, North Node in the fifth house. It's like you can no longer keep up with the same thing that you've been doing, because it is not in your best interest anymore. So the comfort zone card, it says, you are not clearly seeing that so much of what you're doing is about your aversion to the unfamiliar. And sometimes aversion to the unfamiliar is the way to ensure you will never line up with what you truly desire and truly need. Things that are familiar feel safe to us. They feel known and predictable and controllable. It's perfectly understandable why we gravitate towards things that are safe, but this can lead us to a life of limitation. When we're familiar with something like a culture, for example, we tend to have an aversion to contact with ideas, practices, products, and even knowledge that exists outside of that culture. It doesn't take a genius to see how much of a problem that can be. The misconception people have about anyone who is afraid of getting out of their comfort zone is that they're afraid of the unknown. Knowledge is often used by the ego to keep itself away from the rocky seas of uncertainty. But the idea that anyone fears the unknown is totally false. You don't fear the unknown. If we truly feared the unknown, babies would fear everything, and they do not. What we fear is what we project into the unknown based on our previous experiences. Hope you heard that. When we are facing the unknown, the mind goes to work projecting its already acquired fears into the unknown to try to predict what lies there. And then goes to work trying to figure out how to avoid those fears. It's those projections that we fear. For example, if we could have a job that we've been working at for 10 years to do something radically new and different with our life, we're venturing into the unknown, but we don't fear that unknown in and of itself. We fear the potential failure and fall from grace that we could experience socially by venturing into the unknown. We fear this because we've experienced a feeling of failure and fall from grace before and wish to avoid that feeling at all costs. And we fear the potential of unwanted things which predict the unknown could contain. If we learn to not project our fears into the unknown would no longer be scary. Okay, so I think what the main point here is that you have been looking at a situation in your life from the lens of the past and doing yourself a disservice and cutting yourself off from future growth because of this projection that this card is clearly stating. Right next to it, we have the card, Believe in Your Dreams. So there's something that your soul has been calling you to all throughout this year that you've been building up to this moment. Because I've been saying it in many videos for my Capricorn Risings. There's something creative. There's something more soul expressive. There's something more aligned with your gifts, with your authenticity that you need to bring out into your work. or into your life or into a relationship. There's something in this area of your life that you deserve, that you have been cutting yourself off from because of fear of past creeping up on you in this newness. And so what's happening right now is the need with the Ace of Swords and the Devil card to pierce through your attachment to these fears, your attachment to this smallness and this comfort that you have stuck yourself to. Pierce through it with the clarity of the Ace of Swords and the truth of the Ace of Swords to see the situation for what it really is and to get out of it what you truly need. So releasing yourself from that bondage and allowing yourself to move towards a more new and exciting future that feels like it's going to truly fill you up once you pursue it, instead of something that you're doing because it's what you've always done. You guys also have Mercury in Virgo in the 9th house, making a trine to Uranus and the North Node in the 5th house. So this is helping you step up into believing your dreams, seeing them, feeling them, embodying them so that you can actually feel like they are possible. You also have Venus and Leo in the 8th house, making a trine to Neptune in the 3rd house. So the sun's in the 8th house, Venus is in the 8th house, and it's awakening your ability to imagine a future and to also, with a spiritual lens, look at your current fears, look at your current, look at your past crises, look at your wounds, look at your vulnerabilities and insecurities, and looking at them all from a very spiritual and compassionate lens so that you can start to heal some of those things. And with Pluto in the 1st house, you are truly your own worst enemy here. You're combating yourself. You're combating with expectations that the world or your past self or your current self have put on you. And maybe the way the world sees you and how you want to be perceived and how you want to show up and take up space. All of those things are distorting what you truly desire. And you are your own worst enemy. So you're having to reimagine what it is that you want. I pulled the 5 of Wands and the Page of Cups. Whenever I pull the 5 of Wands, when I'm dealing with a reading that feels very internal, I'm imagining this like fight within ourselves. It's like this different, when I think about this, there's all these different wands. And if you've seen the movie Inside Out, there's all these little characters that represent parts of our brain. And there's like the character that worries about everything, the character that enjoys everything, the character that is angry at everything. And I'm imagining that there's like a torch that they're all just trying to reach for. There's like one torch in this specific scenario. There's many, but in what I'm imagining, there's one torch that they're all trying to grab. So it's passing from anger to fear to excitement. And they're all just trying to reach for and grab this wand or this torch in order to have kind of the oomph or the light behind what they believe it should be represented in your brain at that time. And so I think what you guys need to do is pass the torch to someone or to something within your brain that will ensure your success, that will believe in you, and not keep passing it to this part of you that is willing to fear everything or get upset at everything. And the Page of Cups is the beginning of emotional regulation. So I think that there is like a need to, if you think about your brain like that, to pass the torch to the right person that you want to be operating at the helm of your ship and begin to emotionally regulate with some self-control over the mind. The other thing that I want to add with the Page of Cups is there's usually a lot of creativity and inspiration and even kind of like divine downloads and insight that come at this kind of beginning phase. The word illusory is coming into my mind. I don't even know if that's a word. I don't know why. I just felt like I need to say that. So there's something coming in right now. I think you guys are getting these downloads, these insights, and you need to use them. And you need to pass the torch to someone that can utilize them instead of blocking it out and seeing that as a non-potential. Because that's the quickest way to frustrate the universe. It's not that the universe has feelings, but if you're giving somebody like the perfect information and they're just like throwing up their hands like, I can't do that, that's really irritating. because you can see their potential and you can see that they can. And so that person just needs to see it for themselves. So that is what I'm seeing for you, Capricorn. If that resonates, please let me know by liking and commenting down below. And if you want an astrology reading from me, you can check me out at willsboom.com or using the links down below. And I hope you have a great day. Bye. All right, up next we have my beautiful Aquarius rising. So for you guys, this full moon in Aquarius is happening in your first house with Saturn, and the sun is opposite it in your 7th house in Leo. So really big energy for you guys. Very exciting time in terms of having some big revelations about oneself and being able to overcome maybe some stuck energy and some pessimism. And I say that because Saturn is conjunct this moon, and Saturn tends to bring that really negative, kind of pessimistic, downtrodden viewpoint of things, where you might be limiting yourself unnecessarily out of habit, out of a desire for security or safety, or out of fear. And this moon in particular is squaring Mars, Uranus, and the North Node in your 4th house. So it's time for an emotional revolution. It's time for you guys to shake up the way that you've allowed yourself to do things for so long and to feel differently about something, maybe even to change up your home situation. But I think for many of you, it might not be so literal. I think it might be more figurative in the sense that you are not just habitually repeating patterns that you've repeated in the past. And I think that's the situation for many of us. For some of you, that can indicate changes within the home, within the family dynamic, within relationships within the home, the physical home, moving, that type of thing. But oftentimes what I'm seeing with this is something almost more like metaphorical or figurative that will display itself outwardly in the life in a different type of way. So you kind of deciding that you're no longer going to feel a certain way, think a certain way, perceive something a certain way. And as a result, you're able to achieve something else, something bigger in your life. So for everyone, I've pulled some blind spot cards using this blind spot oracle deck. The first card that I pulled for you was blinding pessimism. And that's why I was like, that makes so much sense with this full moon. Blinding pessimism is particularly about refusing to see something in a way that can actually benefit us. You know, refusing to see how something could help us, could be good for us, maybe could be the thing that's in our best interest. I think that's the word I'm saying. And it's like we can get stuck in this pessimistic attitude or way of viewing things in order to keep us in recycling the same situations. Like, oh, that's just how it always is. It tends to give away our sense of agency and our personal strength. So, okay, I'm going to view the situation negatively and, you know, kind of out of my hands. And then I don't have to do something about it. I don't have to make moves because I already think I'm going to fail. So I'm going to fail. I perceive the situation as outside of my control. So I'm not going to try. So it's essentially acting as a buffer between you and what you want. You're constantly bouncing back. Like you have this desire for something, but there's a wall or that buffer in between. You're constantly bouncing back to your set point because of that pessimism or way of viewing a situation. And the other card that I pulled for the blind spot is a denial card. So I feel like this is you denying what is good, denying what could come to you. I feel like the universe is trying to bring something into your atmosphere because I pulled the Ace of Pentacles. This is a full moon in your first house, a time for massive beginnings for you. And this Ace of Pentacles card is trying to bring you this exciting new emotional beginning. Actually, with the Pentacles, it's not even emotional. It's actually a physical offering from the universe. Do you want to act on this opportunity? Do you want to act on this idea and this insight? Let's put it into action. And you're denying it. You're saying, no, I can't do that. I can't achieve that. I'm cutting it off before it comes to pass, before I even have a chance to prove to myself that I can or can't. I'm going to just say that I can't. And with this Angel Whispers card, I feel like this has a lot to do with the North Node, Uranus, and Mars in the 4th house. It's almost like the angels, the universe, is trying to speak to you through signs and symbols in ways that can connect to you on a soul level, on a way in which it will kind of infiltrate you to the core and kind of get down to the bottom of that root self, which the 4th house represents. So it's trying, I feel like, to surpass the conscious mind at this point and get down to that root self, that core, that soul, in order to get its message across. Because I feel like your mind has almost been just being like, no, no, no. And so it's going to do things or whisper to you or put synchronicities or certain things in your path to help you see that, yes, this is for you, and that you can trust this, you can believe in your path, in this path unfolding for you. After the Ace of Pentacles, I have the Two of Wands, which is a card of planning. So it's not even just having this opportunity to rise, it's acting on it. It's making a plan, an objective. What are the next steps? What can I do to actually achieve this? And I feel like you guys are finally ending this pattern of not believing in your ability to materialize the things that you desire. Mercury and Virgo in the 8th house is going to help bring up those insecurities, and it's going to purge them with a trine to Uranus in the North Node in the 4th house. Purge those emotions, release those past pains and hurts that are telling you you're not capable enough, that you're not good enough because of this thing that happened in the past or XYZ. It's allowing yourself to believe that there is a clean slate, a new beginning, and the past is not following you. You guys also have Venus in the 7th house and making a trine to Neptune in the 7th. So relationships are a really great way to help solidify this personal belief, to bring yourself more confidence and a sense of security. And maybe working with others is a great way to manifest what you're truly desiring in the material world, to make more money perhaps, or make money in a different way. So other people are going to be integral in this process. However, Venus is opposite Pluto in the 12th. You're going to have to combat your own internal demons of self-sabotage, of where you unconsciously will work against yourself. And I see that happening here because I pulled the 10 of Swords, and that this is an ending card, a definitive ending of something. And I asked the universe or spirit to define what was ending, and I got the Emperor and the Moon card. So this to me is indicating that what is ending are your subconscious self-limiting patterns, your self-sabotage, the way that you've feared things that are the unknown, the way that you've brought shadows into the picture in regards to your material pursuits, in regards to going after the things that you want and putting in the effort day after day, believing it's possible, putting it on your schedule, planning for it, making it happen, the practical steps. You're like, no, I can't do that because of this subconscious pattern. It's been largely in the unconscious mind that's prevented you from stepping up more into a leadership position. Stepping up, that's what the Emperor is. It's a leader. It's somebody who takes the power into his own hands. And that's what it means to have the moon, full moon happening in your first house. It's time to step up as a leader and stop the self-limitations that's been going on for far too long. So that is what I'm saying for you, Aquarius Rising. If this resonates, please let me know by liking, commenting down below. And if you want an astrology reading from me personalized, you can check that out at willowsboom.com or using the links in the description box down below. Thanks. Bye. All right. And last but never least, we have my beautiful Pisces Rising. So for you guys, this full moon in Aquarius is happening in your 12th house conjunct Saturn. So there is ultimately going to be a process of shedding and releasing anytime I see a full moon in the 12th house, especially with Saturn, which has to do with letting things go and ending things that we have held on to a little bit too tightly, that we have maybe feared letting go of or have used as some type of security blanket. So for you guys, that means the sun is now in your 6th house. So this is usually this axis is very heavily prominent in mental and physical health conditions or states of being. And so that can kind of come up at this time. You might be emotionally dysregulated or deregulated or physically off when things are spiritually not aligned in your life right now. And I think you will feel, again, the emotional or physical repercussions of something not working. And that is what's going to become ultimately so apparent that you cannot keep going in a certain direction, in a certain way, without making a little bit of alterations to what is happening. Because your spirit is being weighed down with this full moon with Saturn in the 12th house. Saturn has this very heavy weighted effect. Your spirit is being weighted down from something that you're experiencing. And I pulled a blind spot card for everyone. For you, you got number 5. So what is your blind spot in life right now? And it says bulldozing. So if you've drawn the sigil, you are bulldozing a part of yourself in this situation. So whatever situation in your life, or maybe many areas of your life, you are bulldozing a part of yourself. And I say part very importantly. Consciousness itself functions like water. If you're looking at a river from above, you can see that a large river often branches into smaller rivers. And each time this happens, there is less water available in the main river. Due to trauma, which occurs for everyone, our consciousness splits just like a river. And instead of the whole, we are then fragmented. And when we have this bulldozing card, what it's essentially saying is that one part of yourself, one little river, is saying yes to something, while another part of yourself, another little river, is saying no to something. So they have competing needs. And instead of finding some creative solution to bridge the gap, what you're doing is bulldozing with one part of yourself that you accept, that you love, that you honor, and bulldozing the part of yourself that you're not as comfortable with, not as familiar with, that you've rejected in some way. And so one part of yourself rejecting the other is creating this kind of win-lose situation, but ultimately you will lose because it's all within yourself. And so what it says is that is why you feel like you're moving forward and doing things in spite of yourself. You be wise to understand that you cannot do this and feel good or manifest anything good at the same time. In the situation, you need to make sure that you move forward on decisions only after you have achieved a state of alignment within your internal self. So you need to have your full self on board because you are essentially progressing externally with one part of yourself, and internally you are fighting or resisting that progress. So you are not going to make it very far. You're not going to feel very good even if you get what you want, because there is a part of you that its need is not met through this experience. And so you need to be more aware of all parts of yourself at this time. And a full moon in the 12th house is the perfect opportunity for the unconscious and these different fragments of yourself to be lit up and exposed and to be seen and eventually to be integrated. Because we're going to have to let go of something or change something, because this full moon is making a square to Uranus, Mars, and the North Node in the 3rd house. This involves a change that we've been resisting. And then the 3rd house, there is some kind of perspective shift. And we might have to even communicate that to somebody. This might affect other people because the 3rd house can also represent a sense of local community. So this decision might also kind of reflect two different sides of yourself, maybe one people-pleasing side and maybe one side of yourself that wants something just for you. So it can be many different things. That's just one example. But the 3rd house is representing a need to talk about these things. And it might just be within yourself and having this conversation, kind of like parts work, having these parts talk to themselves to meet some kind of resolution. Or it could be expressing this externally to find a resolution that works with the group. And I think that this does have to do with the group. Because I pulled the 3 of Cups, it reminds me so much of this Mars, Uranus, North Node in the 3rd house, that there are other parties involved. There are other people here that you need to have a conversation with, because I have the 3 of Cups and the King of Swords next to each other. So it's quite literally needing to discuss things with people that you really care about, that you're emotionally connected to, that you don't want to displease. But in having this conversation, that you are able to find something fair and balanced for everyone, including both parts of yourself. And by achieving this kind of integration or getting both parts of yourself on the same page, not bulldozing, you then heal something within yourself. And this could be on a bigger scale. So it might be this one particular situation where you are healing and mending, but that might have a ripple effect where you're then able to start recognizing when you're doing that, how often you're doing that, and how to start resolving this conflict internally and then externally with others. So I do feel like for many of you, there is this internal conflict partially because of other people in this dynamic. You don't want to hurt someone. You don't want to negatively affect someone. And so having this very, very honest communication, very truthful, very transparent, but also not being overly harsh. There's something just and something fair about what you're saying. Once you've learned to kind of navigate this situation, you'll be able to do that for however many hard situations you have coming up. But there is some kind of meeting of the minds here that can happen, that will happen if you put both sides of you on board and first in this scenario instead of bulldozing part of yourself. And I can tell that this will happen because you guys have Mercury and Virgo in the 7th house of relationships, planet of communication in your relationship house, making a trine to Uranus and the North Node in the 3rd house of communication. So I can see that you are able to create make a creative solution, something that is inventive, something that's progressive, something you haven't thought of before, to bring everyone together on the same page and for everyone to be fulfilled, this fulfillment card, for everyone to feel like they're getting their needs met and no one is losing. It's not a win-lose. It's not a win-win-lose. It's a win-win-win across all situations. You guys also have Venus in the 6th house making a trine to Neptune in the 1st. And so I definitely feel like this is going to help you work together with others while honoring your personal needs and your spiritual soul level needs and desires. And then you also have Venus opposite Pluto in the 11th. So there can be this thing that you need to combat within yourself that's a desire to belong or to conform, that will go against your ability to actually reach true fulfillment across all sides. Because if we are not actually fulfilled, if there's even just a little part of us that's not fulfilled in something, that will affect the people that we're working with, that we're talking to, that we're involved with, in relationship with. And so we cannot pursue that thing and bulldoze ourselves and have that person actually benefit, because the best way for everyone to benefit is for there to be like a true 100% whole part of our whole self into what we're doing. Because people can pick up on energy, even psychically, that someone's not fully present, that someone's needs are not being met, and they are negatively affected by that in some way. The outcome is not enjoyed as much. The process to get to that outcome is also not as enjoyed and fulfilling as much as it should be. So you're not only doing this for yourself, but you're doing it for others. And the conforming is just this idea that it needs to look a certain way, when in reality, when in reality, what you actually want is unity. And that isn't going to be achieved by conforming, but by everyone getting their needs met. So that is what I'm seeing for you, Pisces Rising. If that resonates, please let me know by liking and commenting down below. I hope you guys have a beautiful day. If you're interested in learning astrology or getting a reading from me, you can check both of those things out in the description box down below. And again, I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.